All right, can everyone hear me loud and clear? Are we good to go? Perfect. Thank you, guys. All right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen, looking at the bright space for week 2. And pardon me. So yeah, so here we are with our we've got our week 2 setup going on. We're talking about, well, I'm actually pretty excited. We're talking about one of my favorite things in CSS, which is cascade, inheritance, and specificity. And those things are absolutely critical. They're absolutely critical to the whole idea of of cascading style sheets. So really enjoy this. This is kind of one of those classes where it can be an aha moment. And all the things that kind of like, well, why do we use classes, and where do we use an ID, and what's this for, and what's that for? Well, that all comes into play this week. We're going to learn how to or this class, we're going to learn how to get that all set up. So that comes in as a couple of things. We have an in-class assignment today. You'll see that it's due at 11:59 tonight. That's really a function of asynchronous design. So that means that typically, if we were in person, it would be an in-class exercise. It would be due at the end of class, because as we all know, I'm a big stickler for showing up on time, because I like to start at 8, not at 8:05. But that's a function of people coming from different time zones, and so we just have to make sure it's accessible to everybody. So it's due today at 11:59, but we will go through this today together, because I just think that's a better way to learn, going through it together. That way we can ask questions and do it kind of as a communal thing, and everyone's on the same page, and why we're doing things, rather than just giving you homework with it. This is more of just an exercise to get our brains going on. I just think that's a better format. So we're going to do that together today. We also have your first assignment going out today, right? And the first assignment, this is page redesign. It's a simple 1-page website, really, and it's just some CSS, for being honest. And that'll be due in 1 week. So if we look on May 26th, right? Oh, my dog had a groomer appointment today. May 26th, which is beginning of class next week. And I do that at 8 in the morning. I know 8 in the morning sucks. I do that at 8 in the morning because I just don't want everyone working on the assignment when they should be paying attention in class. That's all that is. So my recommendation is to have it done here. I know in the other class, some people have already submitted the assignment. It's not difficult. Okay. So I'll go through because we have our first kind of major assignment or whatever due today, we're going to see that. I'm going to talk about expectations in terms of assignments, and how to get your best marks, and what I want to see going forward in all assignments. That's an important thing. And then that's already released. You can look at it, but we're going to talk about the specifics of it. We'll go over the rubric, and I'll show you what I see for the rubrics, that that how I mark. That way you guys can maximize your marks. I think that's pretty important. Pardon me, guys. Okay, so just a couple of little housekeeping items. Hang on a sec, guys. There's a ton of people still waiting to get in. Let's just give me a second here. All right. So guys, I can't mark for attendance, but I do take note of who's late and who doesn't show up and things like that on time. And that does affect your ability to access me for if you need help one-on-one. If you don't show up on time, then maybe you don't get timely help from me, right? So those who show up and are engaged are the ones who get engagement from the professor when you need help, okay? So just keep that in mind. Class starts at 8 o'clock, please. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to go over a couple of housekeeping items. There's a few things from just like what I've seen coming forward. I kind of want to nip in the bud, and then we can move forward into talking about cascade and inheritance. So I'm just going to see here, scoot back to the course home really quick. So just a couple of announcements that went out this week. So if you guys want to contact me, I've got 40 some students in this class, and then 40 in the other class. And then I've got CMS 1 that I teach. There's 40 students there. Then I've got the whole rest of there's 90 students that came in on the intake this semester. There's still level 3, there's level 4, the students away. Plus, I've got 20 faculty. So I got a little bit on my plate, guys, on top of teaching. So when you say, hey, I just get an email that says, I have a question about the assignment. what assignment, what class, what section. So please, just in your signature of your email, if you guys wouldn't mind, you can just put something like this. If you don't want to do the signature, that's fine. You can just make sure I know at least your student number and your section, well, and your name, obviously. If I know your student number and your section, then when I go to search for it, I say, okay, I'll just show you. I go, okay, I know for a fact that this student is in responsive web 2. I can click it. I can go right to you because I can see that you're section 2. And if I have something else, then I can say, okay, that's student number, wherever I can go, I can search out whatever I need to. Okay. So just maybe if you don't mind, make a signature in whatever email app you're using. It's pretty simple. Just Google for email signature, Outlook, or whatever it is you're using. Okay. Or at the very least, just include, just so I know it's responsive web 2 section 2, and then I know, right? Super important stuff. People are still rolling in the door here. Bear with me, guys. All right. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is GitHub pages and linking. So there's a couple of things. I'm going to show you guys something really quick. I'm going to go to my github.com /Kingsby. Okay. This is github.com, right? This is the repository. You can tell because it's a website I didn't build, right? This is obviously there's the GitHub link. It says github.com in the URL. Okay, this is a GitHub page for like a GitHub website where I can host my code. That's the whole point, right? Do you guys understand? I go to the repo. Repository is just like a database. It's just a folder that holds all my projects, in this case, index.html. And then we've got, okay, and that's the .com. But then we've also got this one here, which is username.github.io. Okay, and this is your GitHub pages site. This is where you can code that you have uploaded here to your repository with certain caveats can be displayed as a website, so you can actually see that. Okay, it has to have whatever your repository name is. See over here, there's the name, or sorry, another. Let me just clarify. Whatever your name you're signed into GitHub as has to be the name of the repository. KingsBR, right? KingsBR. So that has to be in effect. But this is your GitHub paging site. So when you're submitting something to me, if we look and see kingsbr.github.io/GitHub pages, okay, up here, and I can see that same link here. People sometimes want to do this for me. And they say, okay, I'm going to copy that. That's not the link I'm looking for. If you submit that, it's going to make a link right here. I'm going to go, great. I'm going to click that link. Look where it takes me. This is not a paging website. This is the github.com repository, right? That doesn't do me any good. I want to see your functional working website, right? Because it's a website design class. So I want to see this. So unless I specifically ask for the repository, which I'll try not to do, then I'll always be looking for this one. So please do not submit to me the link from here. Don't go on to the github.com pages and copy that, because I'm going to take the path of least resistance. Oh, look, a link, I can click it, right? I'll click, whatever you send, I'll click that link. Okay. That's because I'm going to act as a client at that point, or act as just a general Joe public guy. So that'll affect your mark. I'm just telling you from now on, because this is how it is. The mark or the grade that I'm looking for, or the grade, wow, the grade I'm looking for is perfect. That's what I'd be looking for. Hopefully that's what you guys would be aiming for as well. But the URL that I'm looking for is in the URL bar here, right? That's where I'm going to get it from. Right click, copy it, submit that. Okay. Any questions about that? Fairly straightforward, right? I just want to nip that in the bud before it becomes a problem. Last semester, there was a major issue with that. People just could not figure out that we had to submit the link from there. I just want to make sure it's absolutely clear. This is the link we're looking for. In week 14 or 13, I don't want to still be going over that this is the link that we need. So let's please that's the link. Unless I specify otherwise, that's the link I want. In the assignments, it should say, we're looking for the username.github.io. or your GitHub paging site. Okay, so I'll try and reiterate that for every time we have an announcement, but I just want to make sure that's clear so we don't have a major issue. There's even a video here on how to get a link from your URL. Okay, so that's the biggest thing. And then, like I said, the other one is it has the repository name has to be set up to match your GitHub name. Any questions about that at all? Okay. Not trying to give anyone trouble or anything. I just want to make sure we're on the same page as we go forward. I'm just gonna have some coffee, so bear with me. Perfect. Okay. All right. Let's get moving forward. Let's talk about one of my favorite things. There's a few key points you guys can get me see me get really excited in this course. Cascade inheritance is the first one. Grid is the other one, and bootstrap. Those subjects, those three things really get me excited in this course because that's when you guys start getting excited, right? You guys are gonna be like, okay, things are starting to make some sense. So I'm going to scoot over here to click on the week 2 for the GitHub and or GitHub. Wow. Okay, it's early. I'm going to click on the IMDAC, right? Click on week 2, and that's going to take me over here in week 2. And we're going to see a couple of things. We've got bad piggies, which is the exercise we're going to do together. We've got page redesign, which is the kind of the assignment you guys are going to be that's a week that'll be kind of homework for you. And the 2 slides we're going to use today. Also, there's some recordings here from previous professor from, I don't know, a couple like a year ago or something like that. They're going to be a little out of date, obviously, and they're from someone else, but you can always refer to them if you need something. At some point, I'll probably remove them from here. It's just because anyway, there's a lot more to it than just going in and deleting some HTML. It's all built in Vue. But yeah, these two slides we'll be working with. And we're going to start off with this lecture number 3, if you want to follow along. If not, you can just watch. All right. So again, today we're going to be talking about CSS Cascade. We're going to talk about CSS inheritance and specificity. We're going to actually do bad piggies today, and you're going to have time to submit it before the class is over. So if you're here and you have an internet connection and a heartbeat, you should be able to get 2.5% of your mark today, this morning. So that's pretty good. Pretty good deal. I've already done the attendance. I do take attendance if you're, present, not present, late, whatever. If you're going to be late, just send me an email so I know, like send it to me 10 minutes before, just so I know, and then I can mark you as it's a different type of late. And the recording, again, will be posted after the class, as soon as it's finished processing from Zoom, posted in Brightspace. All right. So before we get started, are there any questions? Does anybody have any issues, questions, comments, anything they want to bring up? We're all good. You guys are extra quiet this morning. Okay, so cascade, inheritance, and specificity. So we're going to start off with some little quizzy kind of items. Okay, so here we have a little bit of HTML, and then we've got a little bit of CSS, right? Why is this code? Well, actually, we don't have to ask that. Obviously, we're specifying that the H1 is going to be red, so it's going to be red. We can all agree on that, correct? This makes sense. Yeah, I think we can all probably agree. At least 2 people, 3, 4. Okay, so some people will agree that this is going to be red. Okay, this is going to be green. Why? This hello class will be in green. Why is that?
Because you've had it in the cascade, it comes afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so perfect. So you guys know some stuff about the cascade. That's great. So computers read code top to bottom, left to right, right? And CSS was built in English, and that's a left to right, top to bottom kind of language. So that's how it reads the code. When it opens up the file, it starts at the very top left and tries to read all the way to the very top, to the bottom right. And so because of that, it'll run through the code, it'll read the H1, it'll say it's red, and then later on it'll say, oh, the H1 is now set to green. And so it's going to change the value, and then that's what we're going to set with green, right? Because it comes after it, so it overrides the value. Okay, that's great. How about so we'll talk, the cascade. So basically, I think it looks like you guys already know, but it's just really a method that we determine how we're going to combine the property values from different sources, which is important because we can have multiple CSS styles. We can have There's all kinds of contributing factors that can change that. Okay, and it's so important to the name, or to the technology that we're using, that it's actually the name, cascading style sheets, which means going top to bottom, so or flowing over. So we're going to be keeping that in mind going forward. But this is really the default method that we can use to figure out which CSS is going to take precedence. Right? We just say if it's the same. If the tags are the same, then we're going to the later one, the latter one, takes precedence. So that's fairly straightforward. Any questions about Cascade? Does that make sense to you guys? It's a pretty simple process, right? It's like if somebody tells you something and then later they tell you different, you better go with the most recent one. That probably makes sense. You probably asked them, but this is computers. They're very linear. Okay, let's continue on. So in the last instance, and I'll scoot back, we had an H1 with a class of said hello and a color of red and said hello class. Well, in this instance, we have a header with the color of red, and the hello class is still going to be red. Why is that?
Because it's a child of header.
Yeah, because it's a child, right? And the whole idea here, pardon me, is that a child item it takes on properties of its parent, right? So that can happen. When we talk about parent-child relationship, you're going to hear me saying that a lot in this course, because really all web design, especially as you move into things like JavaScript, but all web design is built on this idea called the document object model, the DOM, they call it. And the DOM is really just about this parent-child relationship. Right. So we have a header, and then we have an H1. So we have this parent and child. There could be an anchor in here. So there'd be a grandchild. Okay. And it's just like a family tree. And very similar to that, sometimes families can pass genes on down the line, and those genes have markers. For example, in this case, the header is going to be red, right? So maybe red hair, for example, that would be passed on down the line. Obviously, it's not nearly as specific as human DNA, but that's kind of the idea here. So we could be, there could be 15 levels of children underneath header, and it'll still be color of red. Okay, so in almost all circumstances, that the idea of the genetic marker being passed on takes place, and we call it inheritance. So very simply, we tell the header it's going to be red, and it says, okay, well, all child items inside are also going to be red. Fairly straightforward. Okay, how about if we don't have any CSS set up, right? You think we have it's going to be black, right? Why would it be black?
Is it just the default? I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of what we're getting at here, right? Is it's really the default, and it talks about the reason there's a question. We'll talk about why there's a question mark in a second, right? So inheritance itself really just comes down to, as we said, applying a parent's style to a child. So this is the second kind of principle that we're talking about today. So the first one, we talk about the cascade, which is if it comes after, it's going to take precedence. Inheritance, saying that if it's a child of a parent, then it can take on the values of its parent. Okay, I think you guys probably know all this stuff, right? Or maybe if you haven't learned it formally, maybe you're kind of like, okay, that makes sense. That these are things that we've talked about before a little bit in the past. So it's just coming down to the principle of this, right?
Sorry to interrupt. We've heard of it, Rob, but you're doing a good explanation. You're explaining it well, so I appreciate it. So.
Oh, great. Okay, that's perfect. It's good to know that. I'm not too sure. Different professors have different ways of explaining, and so if you had Travis or if you had Abe, then you're going to have different takes on it. So I'm glad this is of value. So inheritance. So again, if you don't have a property directly set on the child, then certain properties or most properties are going to pass down the line. You can actually tell certain properties. You say, for example, I don't want to have that take place, or I want to set with the initial property. It's like there's certain things you can do inside of CSS to manipulate that. Just like everything with CSS, right? There's always going to be an ability to manipulate, but you should really just let the CSS do what CSS does, unless there's a necessary need to move it. Pardon me. And it's important to note, guys, I just want to make sure I'm in the right spot. It's important to note that we, let's move on. We'll talk about this in a second. So along with inheritance, we have something called origin. Okay. And origin is really where the CSS comes from. And that's really, really important. Okay. And there's 3 different places that CSS can come from. There's really 2 different places, but there is a third option that's kind of deprecated, we call it. Deprecated just means it's out of date, or they're not going to support it anymore, or it's on its way out. So there's what we call the user agent, right? That's one origin, or one source, one place we can get the CSS from. Does anybody know what a user agent is when we're talking about, CSS? Anyone have a guess?
Is it maybe the default of the device the user is viewing it on? That's totally
Kind of close. The user agent is the browser, right? So I'm the user. I can't speak machine code to the server on the other side of the world that has the website. So I have to have an agent do it for me, someone that speaks machine code. And for me, that's the interface. That's the browser, right? So that's what they call it, a user agent. It's working on your behalf to go get the website, turn it into HTML that we can visibly see, and then create, they give us something to work with. So the user agent is the browser. And this is where that default comes in. Every browser has a different default. So some of you are Mac users, some of you are Windows users. There may even be other Linux users. I don't know, but I can tell you right now. So on most Windows browsers, there's a default CSS that's set up right out of the gate, certain defaults that are set up. And this is really why we use a reset, or even better yet, a normalize. Normalize.css, but there's a certain default setup. Does anybody know what that default is in most cases?
Hi.
Hi.
So the default is just a line of code that sort of resets everything, right? It doesn't give any attributes or values to your HTML, basically. Yep. So there's no margin, no padding, no colors, any of those things are usually just defaults.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Do we know what that default setting is? Does anybody have a clue? Like what's the default font size, the default colors? It's always good to know, right? If I said text size or font size 100%, what does that mean, right? What is it going to output? So most browsers, either Mac or Windows or anything, almost all of them to a T, will the default that we're looking at is 16 pixels. That's the default font size, 16 pixels. So if I said 1M or 1 rem and I haven't specified anything else, it's probably going to mean 16 pixels. That's a very important number to remember. So 16 pixels, black text on a white background. And if you're on Windows, it means Times New Roman, right, for a font. And if you're on Mac, it probably means Helvetica New. Okay, and so right away, we can already tell there's 2 different there's 2 different differences, okay, that are set up in the user agent. So right away, we have to say, okay, depending on just which OS, which platform we're on, okay, whether Mac or Windows, there's already going to be a difference. Okay, so origin's important. And we have to remember that when we're designing, because if we don't specify it, then it's going to look completely different on Windows than it is on Mac. Just that alone. Okay. So user agent is the first origin where things come from. The second one is author. What do I mean by author? We're the author, right? We're website designers. Okay. You're authoring the code. So we're probably the more important one. The one we see most often is the author. And we're going to go ahead and create the CSS for the website that people can look at and see, right? And that's where we say, okay, well, we know there's some default, but we're going to set something so that it looks the way we want to. That's simple. That's just writing CSS. Nothing fancy here. This is just what we're doing. And lastly is the user. We don't see this too much anymore. In fact, you have to go and install a special extension into Google Chrome. This is kind of what we call, again, deprecated. But this is the idea that people could install their own style sheet, right? And it was really meant more for accessibility. So I could go right to the browser. I could go into my settings, go to tools. I could go in. I don't even remember where it is. I've never used it. And then I can set up, I can say custom style sheet, and I can put it in. And typically what it was meant for was I would go and say, I want all font sizes to be 200%, right? And that's so that I can see everything bigger, right? That's kind of the idea. Or I need to adjust everything. So I want to make sure all backgrounds are black and all text is white. So I could do that inside. That was a user default, but it's kind of has accessibility issues. There's some ramifications around design and contrast and things like that. So that's really on its way with the door. not super duper useful in that way. And really, if we have accessibility issues, a lot of those tools are built in here. For example, I can always just zoom or unzoom directly right within the browser now. So this is kind of out the door, but there's always going to be a default. And hopefully, because we're CSS masters in here, hopefully we've got the author, right? You guys are awesome at this stuff. So we want to make sure that we're designing really good code as authors. Okay. So that's kind of where we went to. Maybe it's black, because it really depends on the browser. Okay, I can't think of a browser that doesn't use black as the color, like white background and black text. But it's important to note that the default can change depending on what this is. Okay, does everyone see where I'm going with that? So we've got cascade, which is the order everything appears. We've got inheritance, which is maybe it's being brought down from the parent, kind of like a genetic marker. Okay, because that whole idea of a family tree is important, really important to keep that in mind. Does anybody need clarification on that? Because I'm going to be discussing it at length. I'm going to be using that terminology. Right, we should all see that in action. Okay, the whole idea of as you indent in, it means that you're a child of a parent. Okay, it could be a grandchild or any number of things. And then origin is the order appears. Now that also has one further ramification. Okay, one further idea that we should probably take a look at. And I'm going to explore that right now. I'm going to open this up here. Okay, we've got just a nice blank piece of code. Oh, of course, I don't have anything. Let me see if I can set something up here. I'm just give me a sec. I know this isn't going to be awesome. I'm just going to go really simple kind of stuff and like this. Diddy. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is just hurtle. Okay, we've got whatever inside of there. We've got a title. Just pretend it's all set up. I'm going to say this is a demo. Oh, okay, here we go. Now you can pretend that this is all set up and proper. Make that a little bigger. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some styles inside here. So also before we get too far down the road, right away we can see that there's levels, like we have the HTML tag, which means everything inside is going to be HTML. And then we've got our we go in one level, and then a child of HTML is head, right? And a child of head is title. So we've got this idea of a grandchild, or we got like a parent, a child, and a grandchild. That's what I mean by this kind of marker. Okay, so let's add some CSS. I'm going to say link rel equals style sheet, because we need that, and then I'm going to say href equals styles.css. Okay, so here we've just linked up a simple style sheet, super duper. We are the author now. We've updated this. Now I'm going to add a Meyer reset, just pretending that I haven't done that. So I'm going to link that in here. Reset.css, and then I hit save and I go look at my website and it's broken. Why? Everyone here should be familiar with what the Meyer reset is, right? Have we guys used the reset in previous semesters? Everyone knows kind of what we're talking about when we say reset. We call it sometimes the Meyer reset, right? Show of hands, guys, or thumbs up or something, just so I know. Give me a little interaction. That'd be really great, guys. Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so I set my style sheet, added my reset, but then I noticed all of a sudden it looks like garbage. Why is that? Can anyone tell me?
Is it just because you've added the reset after your style sheet?
Yeah, can you be a little more specific?
Sorry, continue.
Go ahead.
It's because the reset would basically reset the entire site to its like basic, like bare bones.
Yeah, it's overriding, right?
Yeah,
exactly. That's what's happening here. This is basically what we've done is we've gone through all the hard work to create the styles, and then we followed it up by resetting those styles. Reset just means revert back to the original, right? And that's what this is doing here. We're resetting everything we've done. So again, origin is important, but there's also an implication in ordering. So what I want to do is I want to move it. I want to have it before. I want to start off by resetting those defaults, okay, and then have my own style. Okay, that's a very important thing. In fact, if you do it the other way around, I may dock you marks. That's how important that is, right? Because it just makes sense. How many times have we done that, right? We added a reset or put styles in the wrong order, and then we had this code that just didn't work and we couldn't figure it out. Rob.
I just wanted to ask, the way we were using the reset last semester, like I was just, I don't know about
Putting
everyone,
it in.
I was just copying and pasting it in the CSS. Is
Yep.
there like, is it more like standard to use a separate style sheet the way you have?
Nope, it doesn't. It depends on how you want to do it. That's a great question. Thank you, Rob.
Okay.
No, it's kind of personal preference. Some companies that you work at and some clients are going to be very particular about having this stuff all modular. I'm fine as long as your CSS is in an external style sheet, which is like this, right? Because that's just the standard. You can go ahead and copy and paste it in. Let's just change the example then. Okay, I'm going to go to, I'm going to change that example and I'm going to go to Google Fonts. Okay, just going to open one up. I'm just going to grab a random font. Here we go. Open Sans. Okay, I'm going to click it and I'm going to, I want to select this style. Here we go. And then I'm going to go into the head and I'm just going to, we all know how to do this, right? Do we all understand what's going on here? Hopefully you guys have used some custom typography. Yeah. I'm just in Google Fonts. I'm just going to add a custom font. So I selected Open Sans. I decided I wanted the light 300 version. So it tells me right away, well, there's link. We'll talk about import later. And I'm just going to grab this and I'm going to copy that, go back to my amazing web page. And then let's just use the initial example here, right? I paste it. I know it looks kind of weird, but okay. So I pasted all this in. There's a lot of stuff, whatever. You guys get I'm just going to get rid of this for now, just so we can kind of see what we have. There we go. Okay, so we've got our style sheet and then we load the Google Fonts. Okay, so this Google font link is going to Google and saying, can I have the font for Open Sans? It goes, okay. But the problem is that we started out by saying we want to render a page that has Open Sans, and then it's going to go, I don't know what that. Okay, well, that doesn't exist. And it's going to generate an error. Because why? Because we haven't loaded the font in yet. We're telling it to access a font that doesn't technically exist because the browser is trying to read top to bottom. You see what I mean by that, guys? So it'll probably still work because HTML is a super forgiving language to learn. It's not even, it's just markup, really. We're just giving context to words. We're saying, here's a word, let's make it bold, right? Instead of just being a word, now it has meaning. It's just context. So the real key here is we want to make sure that we're loading all of our assets, all of our resets, everything first. And then in all cases, we want to load our custom style sheet at the end. Okay, so that's always the case. So no matter what the order of or what code you're building or any of that stuff, guys, in all cases, load your resets, your fonts, your animations, where anything you're loading, load it before your style sheet. Okay, that's an important lesson in Origin and the Cascade and everything else. Because again, the Cascade, it's like resetting after. It's going to look at the Cascade. We don't want to reset something later that we've already built. In this order, we don't want to access a font that we haven't already loaded. Same type of idea. Do you guys see where I'm going with that? Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
Yeah, it's kind of a best practices thing, but it's important to keep that in mind. Okay, I'm done with that line of reasoning. So close that up. So that's the idea of origin and inheritance. So just to recap, we've talked about the cascade, which again is if it comes after, then it's going to override. Okay, and we've talked about inheritance, it takes on its parents. Most items can take on the values assigned to the parents if it's relevant to that particular HTML element, and where the CSS comes from. Okay, very simply. Okay, just FYI, guys, I try to aim for a break every 45 minutes. Sometimes we go to an hour if I'm on a line of reasoning. We will be taking a 15-minute break shortly. I just want to get through the initial setup here. Okay, appreciate your time. Okay, let's look at another example. So how about this? So we've determined a couple of different, main factors in CSS. In this case, hello class is going to come out red. Why is that?
Class takes precedence over just the calling of the element H1.
Sure, it absolutely does take precedence. Can you tell me why it takes precedence?
I forget exactly what it's called, but there's like a number value that goes with it, and the H1, when you're calling it like that, it only gives it 1, versus when you use the class, it gives it 10, I believe, something along those lines. Maybe I'm
okay.
wrong.
Yep. You're absolutely not wrong. Okay, so that's good. It's a concept we're going to learn today called specificity, and it's not really math. It's more putting number in slots. So you're right about that, Mitchell. The idea here is called specificity, and just means how specific we're being. Right? We have an H1, which is a generic thing. It means all H1s, all tags that are a level 1 heading. Again, we're just taking a word or text, which is just plain text, and giving it context now, giving it meaning. In this case, this is going to be a level 1 heading. The words haven't changed. But then here we say a title, a class of title, right? So we're being a little more specific. We're not saying just all H1s. We're saying anything that is in a group that we've made for title. So I'm going to give you guys an example of this. I'm going to go back to my code that we've written, and I'm going to go in here. I'm going to set up a really simple example. I'm going to do it in this kind of what we call pseudo code. Okay. So when I say pseudo code, I'm going to open it up like this, actually. When I say pseudocode, it's important to note this isn't actual code. This is probably what I'm writing more like XML than anything, but I'm going to write something down. I'm going to pretend that as human beings, we are the human equivalent of HTML tags. Okay, so if this doesn't make sense, just put your hand up or let me know, but let's just pretend. If we look in the class right now, the class list of participants, we can see that there's a bunch of humans. Right? There's a whole bunch of humans in here. Okay. Pretend that we are a document. The participants list is a document. Everybody's an HTML tag. So we'll just say human. Okay. Makes sense. I'm just going to look the first 2 people on my list, which I can see there's Rob and then Andrew. Okay. So Andrea is in there. If you don't mind me using use an example, do you, Andrea? Hope not. If you do, you can just tell me and I'll remove it there. Okay, so that we're not going to go any further than this. And I see Carol, we'll do that. Okay, so these are the first people I see. It's just alphabetical. I hope you don't mind. Again, I won't go too far down the rabbit hole. Okay, so and so on and so forth, right? Okay, and what we see here now is that we've got these all these different tags, very generic. Could be H1s, could be paragraphs, could be divs, but just very generic. We said we want to say all H1s are gonna, whatever it might be. Okay, so we can tag that on. But then we can get a little more specific. This is very broad. This is everybody. This encompasses everybody in the document for us right now. So, or in the room. So let's get a little more specific. Okay, we could go in here and we could set up a class, right? That's a little more specific. Okay, we could do it by any number of factors that we want to. In our case, we could do it by, I don't know, gender, shirt color, hair, shoes versus sandals. We could do it by any number of things. Okay, so we could say, I don't know, specialties of things. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so we could set that class up, and we can specialize. So let's just do that by example. I'm going to say, in this case, I'm going to give a class to me of I'm going to say property 1. Okay, and maybe Andrea is also going to be property 1, and it really doesn't matter what it is. I'm just saying property for no reason. And then Carol will say property 2, and we're just narrowing people down, so we can see now that we're broadly putting people into groups. Okay, so it's a little more specific. It's not everybody. It's a little more specific. So far, so good. And then I can go in here and I can say, okay, there's one thing that is unique. I'll put my student number in there. Okay, and then Andrea has a unique student number with an R in it, apparently. Okay, and here we have another one. We have more R's. Why you guys have R's in yours? Okay, man. Okay, so then we've got very specific, because now in this case we've set up an ID. Okay, and anybody can only have one ID that belongs to them. That's why you can only have one ID on a web page at any given time when you look at this kind of idea. So we've gone from very broad to loosely categorized to absolutely unique, because this number that belongs to me, if anyone else has it, then please give me an email. I want to talk to you about stealing my identification. It's personal to me, and so on and so forth. Everyone has a unique ID. We could be loosely grouped, or we could be loosely grouped into more than one thing, right? We could say maybe I'm prop Y, and then we've got prop E, we've got prop X. Oops. You guys get where I'm going with this, right? So we can get a little bit more specific as we go along, but this really comes down to the idea of saying, how specific are we? And there's got to be a way for us to sort out how specific we are, right? This is kind of what I'm getting at. Does this all make sense to you guys when I kind of use it in the context of the class with humans being HTML tags? Is anybody confused by this? This is obviously just a way that we can relate by saying everyone here, if we even just looking, at our pictures, or if we have conversations with people and get to know them, we can say, oh, this person likes rock music, this person likes, hip hop or dance or whatever it might be. Okay. So, so this is just categorizing from broad to specific. Okay. That's all we're really talking about in this case. So here we've said H1 is, sure, it's green, but the more specific we get, okay, the more importance we put on that value, on that H or that CSS value. So in this case, because title is a loose grouping as compared to just a random blanket statement of all H1s, it is going to have more value. Okay, Mitchell's right. There is a numeric value for that. We're going to talk about in a second. There's no math. It's just putting numbers down in slots. So it's fine. It's very simple. Okay, so does that make sense, guys? Do you see how I kind of tied that together? Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I tend to go down the rabbit hole. Let's look at another example, and then we're going to take where are we here? We'll do that. And we'll take a short break. Okay, we're just going to get through these next couple of slides. Okay, here we have a couple of title tags, and then we have hello class, and it's going to be green. Why is that?
Because of the cascade.
Cascading.
You guys got it. Yeah, exactly. So the two values are exactly the same, whether they're both H1s or both title, right? The values are the same. So what we do is we refer to what we call defaulting, which is it goes back to the default thing, the first thing we learned about, which is the cascade. It says if they're both the same, okay, or they have the same, it could be H1 dot title, which means H1, the H1 with the class of title, whatever it might be. If they're the same, then it's going to say, okay, refer back to the default setting and just go whichever one comes after takes precedence. Right? So that's the idea of specificity. Okay, there is a numeric value for that, but it's really just how we can apply, or how we can determine which styles are going to be applied in a certain case, because it can get confusing, right? I mean, how many times have we've been caught with that? And we do that by assigning a weight value. And it's really orders of magnitude is kind of what we're talking about. It's like how much higher it comes in. We're kind of using 10 slots of tens. That's tens, hundreds, and thousands. And the big takeaway is where the specificity is equal between them. Okay, the last declaration we prioritized, that goes back to the cascade. Okay, those are important things. So I'm going to stop here before we get into the actual formula for what it looks like. We're going to take a 15-minute break. We'll come back. I'm going to run a timer, of course. But before I do that, are there any questions that we can talk about as a group before we all get up and leave our computers? Anybody have any questions, comments? Remember, guys, I fully encourage having conversations here in public so that we can all benefit from it. We can have open conversation. This is a community, not a classroom, right? So, okay, so I'm going to run a timer. It looks like we're good. 15-minute timer. When this goes off, then we will we'll come back and we'll get back to it. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rob.
All right, guys. Hopefully everyone's back. A little bit of a break. That's good. Okay, let me close this up. There we are. Okay, guys. So we talked about we talked about a couple of important concepts, right? We talked about cascade, which is if it comes afterwards, it's going to take precedence. We talk about inheritance and origin, which is the order the inheritance is if a CSS item or an HTML property can take on the properties of its parents in CSS. In many cases, we talked about origin, which is where the CSS is coming from, and briefly about specificity, right? Specificity just comes down to, pardon me, it's calculating a weight to say, okay, well, what's, is it a class, or is it a H1, or is it a tag or an ID? Okay. And that's how we figure that out. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. Now, there's a couple of key things. So what we have is, I'm going to show you guys a chart here, okay? And this chart talks about orders of magnitude, okay? An order of magnitude is really just how much higher it's going to get, right? So we have this numeric sequence. Now, we're not doing math. We're just dropping numbers in slots. And if we have, for example, if it's a class of title, then it's going to go into the slot, and it's going to become a 0010, right? If it's just an H1, it'd be a 0001. And the idea here, guys, is very simply, you can have as many numbers as you want to, it'll go numerically, but as soon as you move over to the left by one order, then it'll automatically take precedence. This could be 1,000,000 over here. There could be 10,000 H1s in a row or something, right? This would be 10,000. But as soon as you have one class, it takes precedence. And then as soon as you have one ID, you move over again, it takes precedence over however many numbers you have here. So everything is numeric as it goes up. But as soon as you move over by one order of magnitude, okay, one major level, then you're into the next kind of slot here, and then that takes precedence. Okay, and so the higher the number it is, the more likely it is that it's going to show up more likely it's going to show up. It's going to take precedence. Okay, that means it's more specific. We're going from elements like H1 over to classes, over to ID, over to inline and important. Does that kind of make sense? That's how we do it. There's no math. You just look at how many classes or how many tags there are, or how many, if there's an ID or whatever it might be, and then you just put numbers in the slots to come up with a numeric sequence. Let's see that in action. We'll talk about what they are. So starting all the way from the right-hand side, right, from the lowest order of lowest order of specificity, we have type selectors and pseudo elements. Okay, the least specific. That's like H1 or paragraph, or if we're creating elements out of thin air. We can do that with after or before. And the next level to the left after that, which is going to be the second slot, is going to be the class selector or an attribute selector or a pseudo class. Okay, a little more specific, right? We've already determined that if you have a class of title, it's going to be more specific than just a type H1, right? ID selectors are even more specific, so that's even one further left. So that's a third slot. Okay, and that's going to be more specific. And then the style attribute has the most specificity. Okay, and style and important share the kind of that first slot here, right? They share the slot over here, and they're going to share the style attribute is inline. So H1 style equals color red, or if color red important. Okay, if we have something like that. So let's see that in action. So in this first example, we've got our 0001. Okay, notice it's not just one. We're not just saying number one. And I'll explain why. You'll see why towards the end. Okay, 0001. That's just regular HTML tags, and like we use after, before any content tag to create a div or something like that. That's different. So that order of specificity is all the way to the right hand side. So 1. Okay, and the next level up, which is this next slot over to the left, is going to be classes, okay, and pseudo classes. So things like hover or attribute selectors. So if we say any input with a type of text, or any href that equals Google or something, or any class like that, that'll be the next line over, right? Because it is more specific. If we start here all the way in the right, then we're on regular HTML, but we have H1 with a class of title. That's a bit more specific. So it's going to take precedence, right? It's going to be higher or like a higher likelihood that's going to be just the one that takes precedence and displays. Then we come into IDs. Okay, very simply, ID of header, ID of title. There can only be one ID per page, so it's pretty specific. And then lastly is inline. And that's where we have H1 with like a style inline. Now, this is good to talk about for specificity. Please do not ever do this in anything that you submit to me. If this occurs, you will lose marks. Okay, that's because it's too specific, right? We are always going to try to go for the lowest amount of specificity possible in our CSS. Always. There's never, unless we have to specifically override like something that's already been created in like WordPress or something like that. You're always, when we're writing our custom CSS, we want to do it from the lowest specificity possible, simply because all H1s should be the same, unless we have one that has a special meaning, right? So otherwise all paragraphs should be the same. There's no sense in saying P class equals P1 or P class equals paragraph. It doesn't matter, because it's already going to be a paragraph, unless we need something specific. Okay, we give it a class of, maybe it's a lead in, or maybe it's the copyright statement or something like that. Then we can give it a special class that overrides the default, right? A higher level of specificity, more specific. It's a paragraph. More specifically, it's the paragraph that talks about copyrights. That makes sense, right? You guys with me so far? I know my dog is. Sorry, he's barking. With so far, does it kind of making sense? So the order of specificity is higher, is lower, is what we want. So when we say style equals color red and we put that in the H1, it's too specific. In fact, if you have a really big website and you do this and the color change, then you have to go and try and find that and change that manually. It defeats the purpose of using an external style sheet. The external style sheet, unless I say in the assignment is the standard, that's what I want you to do, is use an external style sheet. And by putting a style in line, it really defeats the purpose of having one style sheet to control everything. Okay. This we see more often in terms of JavaScript, where we can toggle styling on and off, okay, because it's affecting the DOM, things like that. But this is a really specific. Also sharing this far left slot is if we had CSS with an important statement, which we'll see in a little bit. Okay, is there any questions about those levels of specificity? Does that make sense to you guys? Have you guys seen this before? Some of you have for sure, but like in
Yeah, we have. But again, Rob, this is a great way of explaining it. So thank you again for the
Yeah, no problem. Did you guys cover this in level 1?
Travis spoke of it. Yep.
Okay, yeah, Travis, he's got a good way of doing it too. So, but it makes total sense, this idea of specificity, right? So that's what it's really important we keep that in mind. That's how we know what's going to display, and we always want to aim for the lowest level of specificity in our code. In fact, for this assignment we're going to be looking at, we're going to be actually designing and I'm going to be marking your level of specificity, and I'll talk about how that plays out in the rubric in a bit, so you can maximize your marks. But now it's what we're seeing here is a single example, right? H1 P anchor tag or a simple class or whatever, but oftentimes we need to get our code needs to get a bit more specific, because we want to get not just the title, but the title that's inside the nav tag. So we can have more than one number in here, right? We can say, if it says it's a paragraph inside the div, then it'd be div space P, in which case there'd be two HTML tags, a div and a P. So this would be 0002. So we just add them up, right? If there's a class, if it's like a paragraph, but it has to have a class of title, then it'd be a class and a paragraph. So it'd be 001, there'd be class, and 1 for our paragraph. So it'd be 0011. And that's why we don't count it as 1 or 11 or 12 or whatever we do, right? Yeah, so that's why we want to do that kind of thing, right? We want to make sure that the idea is that we could have, there could be a really long selector here, in which case it could be like 12, right? So then if we start looking at this in terms of one big number, then if we said 12, in that case, we think 0012, and that's not the case, right? So we can say it colloquially, like among each other, we can say, oh, it's 12, and we'll probably know it's 1 and 2, because there wouldn't really probably be 12 selectors here. That'd be a really big, long thing. But technically looking at more like 0, 0, 0, 1, right? That's where we're at. We'll see that in action. Okay. So here's what we're talking about, right? In this case, the specificity, so is a question. So 0002 will take precedent over 00. Yes, exactly. Think of it as weight. Okay, what we're looking at, imagine this. We have a bucket, okay, and the bucket is our specificity bucket. It's a terrible name for the bucket, but that's what we're going to call it. And you, in the case of 0001, okay, it's pretty broad. There's one stone inside, so it's not very heavy. The weight is low. Okay, but in the case of 0002, we've added another stone. That bucket is going to be heavier, so it's going to take precedent. It's going to be more important, right? It's going to flow further down the cascade because it's going to be heavier, so it's going to drop lower. Does that make sense? If you have a bucket floating in water and you have 0001 stones versus 0002 stones, then according to the cascade, the more stones you have, the higher the number, so the heavier the weight. Does that make sense to you, Jesse?
It does make good sense, Rob. It's good.
Yeah. Okay, and that's really the idea. So sorry, I was just looking for some confirmation there. So that's good. I appreciate that. And so always the numbers are higher. But the really key important thing here is it could be 0, 0, 0, a million. But as soon as we move to the left and it goes 0, 0, 1, and then a million, the 1 will always take precedence. So as soon as we move over to the left, right? And we have to remember also that, because like I say, it could be a million here on the far right-hand side. So it's not what we call a base 10 system. So it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 1, 0, and then 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It doesn't work like that. This could be any number. And as soon as we have a class, it could be any number of elements in your selector. And as soon as we have a class, then this goes up, that will take precedence. As soon as we have an ID, that'll go up, take precedence, and so on. So this is where we start getting something a little more complex like this. So here we just, this is always important to look, and I started the right. I say, how many classes are we, or how many HTML tags are we affecting? We're only affecting one. I'm just looking at punctuation, really. We're only affecting one. So there's our one, and then we're only affecting one class. So there's our one there, and one header. So one there. And that way our number becomes 111, right? So our specificity number for this is 111. If we move on, okay, really, we're looking at the same thing. We've got an H1 that has a class of title inside an element that has an ID of header. That's what we're looking for. Well, the same is true here. An H1 with a class of title that's inside an ID of header. But this is more specific because the ID of header also has a class of header. The H1 also has a class of title. So our specificity number changes. Do you see how they're the same? It's just getting a little more specific. Just break this down into real English, right? We have an element that's an H1, and that H1 has a class of title. When you see them really tight next to each other, let's just look at that, just in case you don't know. When we see them next to each other like that, there's a couple of ways to do it. I can say H1 dot title, right? Ugh, I hate when it updates everything like that. Okay, so we've got a couple of different options. We've got H1 dot title. What's the difference between these two? What's the difference between these two pieces of code here? There's a space, right? Right here. What does that space mean? When you have a space, what does it mean in CSS? It means inside of, right? So if we have a space, that means inside of. If we have a comma, it means and, right? You guys learn this stuff, right? So the difference between this is we have in the first example, we have any element that has an H1 of title that's inside of an H1, right? That's what we're looking at. The second example, because they're tied right together, there's no space, it means with. An H1 specifically with a title of, or with a class of title. So in this case, it's an H1, and then we look inside the H1, and anything that has a title, this one on the second line is going to be an H1 that specifically has a class of title. And there can be multiple things. Maybe it has a class of title and it has a class of red text. So it has two classes. So we just tie them together. Do you guys know that that was a thing?
I didn't really know about the two classes, but
Yep.
I kind of get what you're saying.
Yep. Maybe it
I
also
do.
has an ID of intro. So we have an H1. In this second case, it's an H1. It has to have a ID of intro and a class of title and a class of red text. So all of these things have to come together. So it would have to be an H1 with an ID equals intro and a class equals title and red text. That's what we'd be looking at. That's how it ties together, as compared to this first example, where it's an H1, and then inside of that we've got a, I don't know, whatever. It's a span with a class of title. That's the difference between those two. Okay, so the specificity changes. Anyway, that's important to note when we see things like this. So now here we have an H1 that's going to have a class of title, and that's all going to be inside of an element with a class with an ID of header. Now let's look at the next level of specificity. It's going to change, but it's the same thing. This H1 has a class of title and it's inside of an ID of header, but it also has, more specifically, the ID of header also has a class of header, and the H1 also has an ID of title. So we have to add these together, right? We start with our regular HTML tags. We only have one. So we're going to be affecting an H1. And then we say, okay, how about classes? Well, we've got a class of title and a class of header. There's two of them. We're just taking numbers and putting them in slots. And then how many IDs do we have, right? So even though this is effectively testing the same, it's going to be looking at the same item. So it's way more specific, right? So the number's higher, And because we just looked to the left all the way, it's got a higher number in the 3 slot, excuse me, the ID slot than the first example. So it's going to take precedence. So far, so good. All right. Oh, I gave up the ghost on this one. So the specificity here, we'll just go over it again. There's 2 H1 tags. So we start with there 2. There's 2 classes. So our specificity is 2 and 2. How about now? Anybody want to give me a specificity? Without don't cheat or whatever. Like if you don't take a guess at it, don't go looking at the next slide and popping the numbers in. Obviously, you know what it is then, but just give it a try. Start with at the lowest level of specificity and then work your way to the left.
Would it be 2, 3, and 2? Like, is the pseudo class first child considered part of the specificity?
So the pseudo class counts as a class, right?
Okay.
It's still a class. So how many HTML tags do we have generically?
We've got 2.
We've got 2, right? We've got the header and the H1. So all the way to the right, we start on the 2. How many classes do we have?
So yeah, it would be 3, right? Header,
1,
type, and first child.
2, 3. So right now we're looking at 0. So far we have 0, 0, 3, and then 2. Does that make sense so far? Yeah. And then how many IDs do we have?
Also 2.
Yeah. Also 2. So we got 0, 2. Then there's no important and there's no inline styles that we can see. So we've got 0 for the inline or important. Okay. Then we've got 2. So 0, 2, and then we go into classes. There's 3, and then there's 2 HTML. So 0, 2, 3, 2. There it is. So when I'm doing this, when I'm trying to figure out specificity, in my mind, I'm only counting punctuation. That's all I'm doing. It makes it really easier rather than trying to, what am I doing? I'm just counting punctuation. So I look to see how many regular HTML tags there are. That is words in here that don't have a dot or a hashtag or a colon in front of it. That's it. And then I work my way that way. Oftentimes we don't have to, we're figuring this out for 1 or 2 or 3 elements. That's it. We're not going too crazy. Typically, we're building a really simple structure. Okay, so 0, 2, 3, 2. Good. Okay, so how about this one? What's the specificity of this one?
Literally just 0, 0, 0, 12.
Yeah, 0, 0, 0, 12. And you can see now why 12 would be a weird thing if we're using numeric, because why would you write that, right? That would be a really weird case. If you wrote that, you're probably doing it wrong. This alone would probably be good enough for this, but there's that's not the correct way to write HTML. But for example purposes, 0, 0, 0, 12 makes sense. Before I continue, can I get everyone to do a raise hand? I just want to make sure. I'm not hearing a lot of feedback. I just need to make sure everyone's actually here. If you're not here, I'll just remove you. Appreciate that, guys. Oh yeah, that's awesome. Yes, I like it. Keep those hands up. It's nothing personal. I just need to make sure everyone's here. This is really important, and this plays into the assignment. So I just need to know who's actually here. And there's always going to be the normal folks that just aren't here. So if you guys could just raise your hands. There's like 6 people who just aren't. Are you guys ghosting or? All right, well, it's your grade, whatever. Take a look at the list, guys. You don't see their hand up, don't give them help in Discord. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. They don't want to be here. They don't have to be here. That's ridiculous. Okay, let's move on. It just gives me an idea of what I'm dealing with for students. Thanks, guys. If you guys can lower your hands, that'd be super duper. Okay, thank you very much for those of you guys with me, guys. We're going to take a break here, short in about 20 minutes. But I think before we do that, we're just going to look at a couple more examples. And then we'll try to do that exercise today in class, and then we'll take a break. So in the next break, you'll be able to submit a finished assignment, 2.5% of your mark complete. All right. So knowing what we know now, let's take a look at this. The code that we say, exact same HTML, a little bit of different CSS down here. The hello class text is going to be red. Why is that?
Because title is more specific.
Title is more specific. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, the title is more specific. Okay, so the title class, so it's a higher number of specificity, right? It's 0010 versus 0001.
Yeah, and H1 will never take over that, right?
That's right. Yeah, not unless it has a. They could if we had
Yeah.
h1.title, then
Yeah.
it would be 0011, right? So I'll type it out in the thing here, just for example. If we said we have a couple of examples, we got h1 and we've got .title. So in this case, I'm just going to go like that. We have a specificity of 0001, right? And in this case, we've got a specificity of 0010. But because we've moved over by an order of magnitude, which means we're one step to the left. That's all we mean here, right? Then that means this is going to take precedence. But the H1 could technically take precedence if we did something like this. In which case, what's the specificity going to be?
Zero, zero, one, one.
Exactly, right? There's one HTML tag and one class. And now this one is 11 versus this one's 10, right? 1 versus 1 0. It's a higher number. So it'll take precedence. And as soon as we add an ID in the mix and this gets added in, it doesn't matter what these numbers are. This will always be the higher the ID number will be more specific and higher. I think you guys are getting where you're picking up what I'm throwing down. Okay, let's keep going. These samples coming up are a little more common. So there's some issues in here. Okay. In this case, hello class is going to be green. Why is that?
Header takes precedent? Because header, then you have the ID tag, so it's higher in number.
Well, what's the specificity of these guys?
The specificity is the same, but right now the second one takes precedence because of Cascade.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is the exact same as if they both said H1, or if there was an H1 or like, right, they're both targeting the same element. It's important to notice that they're both targeting the same elements, right, in different ways. But because they're targeting the same element in different ways, and the specificity is exactly the same, which is 0011, then we have to revert back to the cascade. Right. So if in any situation, if you're targeting the same element, okay, we can all agree that they're both targeting. In the first example, it says anything with a class of header that has an H1 inside of it. That's this, right? And the next one, we're saying an element that is a header that has something with a class of title inside of it. Well, that's this one. So it's targeting the same element. So then we say, okay, well, let's check the specificity. Specificity number is the same. So we say, okay, now we have to do what we call defaulting and refer back to the default, which is cascading. And that means the one that comes after is the winner. Does that make sense? So it can get a little confusing, but that's why we have these rules in place. Otherwise, this would be like, well, who the heck knows? And so these rules become really important. And then we kind of have to do a little check in our head. And how many times have we done something like this in our CSS and said, well, why is it green? I told it to be red. What the heck? Right? Why is it doing that? And then what we can do is say, well, it must be a specificity issue. It's the same way we know that if the the width looks weird, it's probably a box model issue. Like our width plus our padding is too much, or it's more than 100% or something. So in this way, we can say, well, this must be a specificity issue. Or a cascade issue. It's a CSS ordering problem. Okay, how about this one? Why is this text green? Throwing you guys for a loop on this one. Why is the text green on this one? I'll give you just a sec. I'm not going to answer this one until I get some answers in. So I imagine people right now are saying, okay, so we're doing the specificity, and I can see, well, there's a 1 in there, the header, right? The header has a higher specificity, this ID, right? There's a higher specificity, so it should be in place, right? But why is it not? Why is this particular tag not in? Well, the ID of header has a higher specificity, right? So that ID of header should mean that it's red, but it's not. It's going to be green. Why is that the case?
Is it because you're in the first line, you're just targeting the header and then it's giving it to the child, but then in the second line, you are directly targeting the H1 element?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It was kind of a trick question. Sorry, guys. The numbers, like I said, there could be any number. What's the specificity in the first example is going to be 0, 1, 0, 0, right? There's no HTML element. There's no class, but there is one ID. So 0, 1, 0, 0, pretty specific. In the second example, it's more numbers. Okay, not necessarily more specific though. It's a 0021, right? There's one HTML tag, there's 2 classes and nothing else. So 00, 00, and then 2, and then 1. So this should take precedence because it's got a higher number further over to the left. But it doesn't. And that's simply because, sure, if this didn't exist, then yeah. If the second one didn't exist, then yes, it would say the H1 inside is going to be red because it would use inheritance. But we have to be careful. Sometimes we don't get caught up in that, right? Always look at when we're looking, I always look at this furthest slot at the specific HTML to make sure I'm targeting the right elements. Get rid of all the classes and everything to make sure that you're targeting the correct place. The ID of header is going to be the idea of H1, the proximity is important, right? We're actually affecting this particular element, so the inheritance doesn't matter anymore. Tricky, eh? I'm a jerk. Come at me, bro. Okay, so that's fine. That's kind of a little trick that we have to be careful about, right? Does that make sense to you guys? Anybody confused about that? To be fair, it was a little bit of a trick question, right? But it does happen. How come that's not being affected? Well, it's because we have to be careful that we're targeting the right element. It's about targeting and proximity. So in this case, we're targeting the H1 directly. So that's going to take more importance. Like in this case, exactly, we're saying like the priority is almost more important than the specificity number. Mitchell.
So then hypothetically, if you were in that first line there, if you were to add, say, or you do a space and then you add, you call the class title. Mm-hmm. So that would be, you're looking in the header element for something with the class title, and then it would take precedence.
It would. And why is that?
Because now you are directly looking for the H1.
That's right. And because you've done that, yes, exactly. Sorry, cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, just because then you're directly looking for the H1 element and the specificity is higher,
right?
Compared to the second line.
Exactly. So it's the inheritance doesn't matter anymore. We're counting specificity of a particular element that's the same. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Anyone else? Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay. How about this one? Class of red, or the color is red. Why is that?
Because the H1, you're calling the ID title, and so the H1 directly has the ID title, so that has the higher specificity, and so it's taking precedence over the bottom line.
You got it. In this case, we are targeting the same element. So in this case, specificity is the one that the numeric specificity is going to take precedence. It's going to be more important because we are targeting the same element. So the numeric specificity will override the cascade. So there's actually a whole ordering. It's a set of rules that all run in the same kind of direction. So they can kind of counteract each other. It's a little finite sometimes trying to figure out what that means, but I feel like maybe you guys understand what I'm talking about. Does anybody not get it? Is it still very confusing? Keep in mind, this is a skill that you're going to learn over time. And it's also important, this is a really good exercise in writing modular code with low specificity. And what you're trying to do, the real key here is to build your CSS in such a way that we're working with the lowest specificity and everything's very modular. We always talk about consistency and key. And when you look at websites, we want to make sure that the H1s look the same so everybody knows that that is an important heading. It's when we see that heading at that size, it's important. And when I see a certain type of text, then I know that's body text, right? It's consistency, and I can do that all without having to use a lot of classes and whatnot, right? So let's see. So there's still some confusion. What exactly is that I can clarify for you? Just in the text. You can go ahead and use your mic if it's easier than typing. I have no problem clarifying. It's fine.
Hi. So I have a question actually.
Okay.
So in my CSS, from your explanation, we need to target the least specificity. So if I have a div with a class, right? And there's an H1 in the div, for example. So I do dot class title, right? And then I do H1. That's a better way of targeting the H1 whatever the H1 element in the CSS. Is that how you? So if you're coding your CSS, or if you're styling your CSS, are you going to do it like that in terms of selecting the div, the class of the div, and then the H1?
Well, that's a great question. The real it's more you're talking about best practices, right? Like what's the best way to go about doing this? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yep.
Yeah. So when you're writing your code, specificity, I mean, we're not sitting here doing math, right? We're not trying to figure out oh my gosh, do I do this? Like that's kind of a little beyond what we should be worrying about. But what we should be doing is we should be getting our minds in the idea of saying, let's go back here and take a look at the very kind of beginning. Scroll all the way back here to the first examples. We should be starting writing our code here. I'll show you how, this is kind of how I would start writing a style sheet, just by example, right? So I would say, okay, I'm going to get rid of all this, and I'm going to start out, maybe there's some reset, maybe there's not, but I'm going to start at the base level. I'm going to say the body is going to have some font family of whatever. I'm just going to be just generic, okay? And then paragraphs, I've already set the font family, so I'll just say I want the color to be white. Maybe there's a background color. I'll just, whatever, okay? Background color is black. I'm just generic, okay? And then I would say, okay, I got my H1s. Now I've got my H1. I've already specified a certain font family. So I'm going to say font family 1, for example. And in this case, I'm just going to override font family 2, right? So this is a different one. So everything right now in the body is going to be font family 1. I'm just getting a little bit more specific. This is after that. So it's going to override. So I'm just working my way down. Maybe, but also maybe there's an H1 specifically that I'm using only on the front page for the introduction. And that one maybe has something a little different. So I'm just going to go in here and I'll just say font size. It's going to be a different font size, right? Let's say it's going to be 1.4 rem. And this one I'll just say font size is going to be 1.1 rem. So all I'm doing is I'm working my way down slowly, but notice I haven't really even gotten too much in, like, I'm not going to go too much further down the road than this. I'm relying, first of all, on the lowest specificity. I'm going to build all my generic tags out first before I even really get too far into H1s or into classes and IDs. I'll probably never really use IDs. I don't think I can't remember the last time I used an ID. I don't need it. There's no really no requirement for that. And so I start out really basic. As broad as possible. Body is going to affect everything. Paragraph is probably the second most common tag I'll use. H1 is, just working my way slowly along. So when I'm building those things out, right, keeping in mind, and I'm just overriding any values that I have to. So for example, H1 is more important than body, so the font size will be overridden here. And so I'm working from as broad as possible on the lowest specificity, and then slowly working my way up. Right? Does that kind of make sense? Like, do you see where I'm going with that? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. That's the best bet. Always go from as broad as possible. Like, and you're going to see this in future assignments. You're going to say, well, how did you get to that conclusion so quickly? Well, it comes down to start with, I'm going to give you guys an analogy. There's a time management theory that can apply here. Okay. And time management theory, for anyone who's heard of it, is called the pickle jar, or the sand jar. It's a jar theory of time management. And it applies the same way here. We want to start broad and work our way down small. And the idea is, if you have a great big jar in front of you and you're sitting at the beach, okay, and you've got to put all this, you got a bunch of rocks and a bunch of pebbles and a bunch of sand, and it all has to fit inside the jar. If you just take all the sand, all those small little things, the little details, the paragraph with the class of whatever and an ID of whatever, specific thing, and then an H1 and a span inside of that, and that one has a class type. This is super specific. Okay, this is granular. It's too small. Like it's very, very specific. Okay, so we would break that down to being really specific. It can only affect a small amount of things. So this is like, I would call that like sand. And so we put all the sand in the pickle jar, or in the jar, and then we put our medium-sized rocks in. We'll never fit our big broad stuff in. It'll never get in there, right? It'll never work our way. So that's the wrong order. Our CSS would be way too packed. It'll cause nothing but problems. The correct way to order it is to put the big, broad level items in. Start with, things like really broad items. These are the bigger stones. They'll cover way more things. And then slowly work our way into the medium-sized pebbles. So then they'll fill in between the cracks. And then finally, we can get into something. Maybe it's got a class of intro and a class of italic, right? And then we work our way into our big specific stuff, right? And that, or move our way into the smaller, more granular stuff. And that way, we start with the big items, we move to the medium items, and then we move to the small items. And because they'll always fill in the cracks as they work their way down, that's the proper order to do it. It will be able to fit everything in a nice compact order, because they'll just go around. I don't know, maybe I'm just trying to attack this from different angles so people can see. But best practices it's one of those things we'll discuss a little bit later, but specificity plays a large part in that, right? It's always better to have something like this than it is to have, I don't know, something like this. This is far too specific. This is very, 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 it'll only cover one exact thing. So there shouldn't really be a need for that. Okay. I think I saw a hand up. So is there anyone still have questions? I'm sure there's still some confusion, right? What is it, the punctuation you said when you mean the space means inside of? So the question is, I didn't understand what the punctuation is about, what the space means inside of. So let me open this up. Oops, that's the wrong one. That's Sublime Text. I got too many text editors, guys. So when we were talking about, let me just see if I can. So if we said something like H1 and then had something like, you mean this one here, Carol? Versus, oops, there we go. Is this what you're talking about? Yeah, okay. So this is just an order. So there's a couple of rules in just generic HTML and CSS that we always have to hit on. I'll just talk about this briefly, just as a refresher for last semester. So we can get pretty specific, and we're going to see this in our examples today, so I want to cover it now. There's a few rules, right? If we have a comma inside of our CSS selector, that's this first part, right? If we have a comma in there, it means and, right? So if we had something like, that means we're going to, the properties we select over here are going to affect both H1 tags and anything with a class of title. That's what the comma means, right? And if we have a space, it means inside of. So we're going to be affecting anything with a class of title that is inside of an H1 tag. Right. In the second case here, we want to, it has to be an H1 that specifically has a class of title. So they're all very separate. They look the same, right? But they're all very distinct. There's also some, we're going to talk later about combinators, things like this, or things like this. Okay. Very specific stuff that you guys haven't seen before. We're going to learn that later. But these are just like how we make what we call compound selectors, right? So if we have a space, it just means an H1 that has anything inside with a class of title. I always start at the far right. Anything with a class of title that's inside of an H1, right? And then in this case, we'd have an H1 that has a class of title. It has to be specifically. It wouldn't be a div with a class of title or a P with a class of title. It has to be an H1 with a class of title because there's no space there. And in this case, we have a comma, so that means and. So an H1 and class of title. Does that clarify for you, Carol? And what do we have here? So H1.title is more specific than H1.title. That's an interesting question. Let's do the math. We have two examples, right? Let's get rid of this one for now. Here we have two examples. What's the specificity for the first one? What's the specificity number here? H1 the space dot. So 0, 0. So nothing inline or no important. For example, there's no IDs. There's one class. There's one title. Okay. How about this one? What's the specificity for this one? 0, 0, 1, 1. Okay. In this instance, which one's going to priority, right? So maybe this one's, we'll just say red, and this one's blue. Okay. What color is it going to be? Which one is going to work? Blue. Yeah, blue. Yeah, for sure. And why is that? It's because the specificity number is the same, even though it's a different tag. We're still affecting the same thing, right? It's still the same amount. Now, the difference is that we have to make sure that proximity is being met. So it all depends if the title in this case is an H1 tag or not, because otherwise we're going to be affecting different elements. We have to be careful about that. That was, remember that tricky one we did. We're talking, the proximity is, are we targeting the same element, right? Okay, don't worry too much. It's I shouldn't say that. Let me just, we're doing this anyway, so I'm just going to before we take our break, we'll build this out as a little bit of an example. So we've done the CSS. Now let's just break out different examples in HTML really quickly, right? In the first case, we've got an H1 that has a class of title inside. So let's say H1, and inside of that, we've got a span with a class of title. Okay, and then we'll say item 1, and then I'm going to close the span and close the H1. Now, we have to be careful because there's a difference, right? Because the span, okay, which is just a HTML structural element, is inside of the H1, then in this case, we're targeting different things. In the first case, it's the H1, and there's something that has a class of title inside. Okay, in the second case, it's the H1 has to have a class of title, right? Because there's no space between the HTML element and the class, so it means with, right? The H1 with the class of title, as compared to the H1 that has inside of it an element with a class of title. So even though the specificity is the same, they're going to be different. We're targeting different elements. So that's more important than anything, because all of these rules only take effect on the element that we're targeting, unless there's some sort of inheritance thing going on. There's a lot of rules to remember, right? But writing nice, clean code with low specificity helps figure that all out, right? If we had lots of classes and lots of IDs in both of these things, then it gets really confusing, right? So lower specificity is really best practice, keeping it nice and easy. Again, the rock, we want to fill it in as broad as possible. fill everything else around and get more specific as we need to only. I know, a little confusing. Let's give our brains a break. Let's take a break. Okay, and when we come back, we've looked at all this stuff. When we come back, we're going to actually do the assignment, the exercise together. Okay, and I'll even give you guys a couple of seconds to get it submitted. And then we'll move on to the second part. We're a little behind now. We'll move on to the second part, which is best practices, and we'll talk about the assignment, and then we'll be on our way. Okay, so I'm going to set my timer here for 15 minutes, and then we'll come back when this is done. All right, thanks, guys. All right, guys, we have made it back. Appreciate that. Okay, hopefully everyone's back from their break at their computer again. There's a few latecomers that came in, guys. Just as a reminder, if you're going to be late or absent or anything, just send me an email. That'd be the best bet. Just so I know. You got to kind of treat it like it's work, and just let us know. And if you let me know, then it's great. And believe me, it'll pay off for you in the end. Okay, so that's good news. So here we have the Bad Piggies assignment. So we're going to be going through this together because that's just how we like to roll. So we're going to get that done. Don't worry about the due date that's in the slides, because obviously it's not due on January 14th, because that would be ludicrous. So we are going to be, so it'll be due today by the end of the day, 11:59 tonight. Again, late submissions are not accepted in the program, so the same is true here. But I'll give you time after the assignment or the exercise is done to actually submit it in class. Okay, so we should be good. So what we're going to do is we are going to go. I'm just going to close this slide altogether. There's our thing. Okay, you can go from right within Brightspace. You can see the in-class exercise. We're going to click on it, and that'll take you to this page. Okay, it's under your content. You can also access it directly from IMDAC under week 2, and here it is. So basically, it says, "Oh no, the Bad Piggies have painted themselves all red. How are we going to tell them apart? Well, we're going to have to use CSS specificity to change their colors back." Okay, and that's the key. Excuse me. Okay, so we are going to go down here to this Bad Piggies assignment and click on it. And that's going to take us over here to a code pen. Now, I know you guys all have code pen. So make sure you're logged in. Okay, that's the first step. Make sure you're logged into your code pen over here. Okay, so click on it, log into code pen. That's the very first step. This is going to be a blanket step for almost all of our exercises, almost all of them. We're going to be using code pen. And so the first step will be to log in, and then we're going to look over here and we're going to see it says IMD. Also in the URL, it says IMD. That means it's mine, not yours. So you're going to have to fork it. How do we fork it? Once you're signed in, once you're logged into it, go down to the bottom right down here in the corner, and you're going to want to fork. Okay, that'll create a new version of all this code with your username up here and your username in the corner. It'll probably say codepen.io / whatever your CodePen username is /pen, and then right. So that's the key. We want to make sure that's the case. If you submit me a URL, because remember, when you submit, we're just going to go like this, and we're going to copy. You don't get it from anywhere else. If you submit it, it has IMD in it. This is going to be empty in the CSS, and you're going to receive a 0. I grade what I receive, right? So I'm telling you now, log in. Fork the code always, because you want to create a copy of this, just like a fork. The little picture shows it, right? There's a little main branch, and you're going to create a little branch, sub branch for you to work on. And you'll know you're there because it'll have your username underneath the title and your username in the URL. Are we clear as mud? Crystal clear? Any questions? Anybody having issues logging in?
Nope.
We're all good.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. All right. So that's the big thing. Hopefully everyone's, if it says, remember, just take a look, take 2 seconds. If it says IMD, you're in the wrong spot. It should say fork, right? You should go to fork, and it should say your username. Okay. So here's what we're going to do now. Just here's our 8 piggies, or really it's what amounts to 8 tasks that we have. Okay. And they've all painted themselves red, and we can't tell them apart. So we're gonna have to use specificity to tell them apart. Now I'm gonna go through this and explain to you. The HTML itself, we're not gonna be affecting that. We're just gonna be writing CSS. So we're doing that. This is purely, it's in Brightspace on week 2, right? So if we go to Brightspace, all the exercises and all of the assignments, all the work that we're going to be doing will be found in Brightspace under the week that we're in, right? If you're confused what week it is, you can go to overview and look for today's date. And there we go. We're in week 2. It'll even tell you what exercises we're doing and everything. So we're in week 2, and then we can see that we are doing the in class, which is the bad piggies. So follow through with that one. Okay, so back to bad piggies. So we're going to use specificity. Now, as a matter of function, it's very rarely, it's never that we're going to say, okay, I have a specificity and I have to come up with the code around it, right? This is purely an educational function where you wouldn't do this in the real world, but this is a good way for us to say, okay, I need to determine what those numbers mean, and I have to take a look and see how I can tie those together and correlate them. So this is kind of an exercise to tie those two foundations together. Okay, so don't worry about it. This will seem arbitrary, but this is one of those things that you won't have to do in the real world. But it'll really help cement it in your mind with the, seeing one direction, we're going to do it the other direction. That's all that's happening here. Okay, and I'm going to do it frankly with you. This is a community thing. What we have is every pig is basically a div, okay, with a unique ID. And they have a shared class of piggy, and then a unique class of piggy dash whatever it is, 1, piggy dash 2, piggy dash 3, etc. The data spec just puts the numbers underneath. So for example, here on piggy 2, it says data spec 0011. It just puts the number of specificity underneath. That's all it is, okay? And that's just because that's how we've styled it. And so they're all like that. Everything is sitting, all of the piggies are inside of a section that has a unique ID of piggies and class of piggies. And all of that is inside a main with a class of container. Okay, so they're all really the same. They all look mostly identical, except for a few numbers and things like that. Okay, and that's where we're at. Now, by function, because of the way I had to design this will be a little extra specific just by design, because anything that's in main, I'll have to specifically declare main to get it to be specific enough to work. And anything that has a div with a class of X or a div with an ID of X built in, that's by function. We're going to be specific that way. We're going to do this together, so no worries. Let's start with the very first one, and it's got the example right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, so for the first piggy, I'm going to, we have to first look at the specificity. This one wants a specificity of 0002. Which means 2 HTML tags. We can see the example right here. We need 2 HTML tags. We want to start with proximity and work our way out, right? So we're going to look at this one, say, based on proximity, we know we want to affect this particular element. Is there an HTML tag, just an HTML tag on here we can use? And we'd look and we'd say, there's data spec, there's a class, an ID, and there's an HTML tag that is attributed to this particular item. So yeah, for sure, we can say div. Now, that's the proximity, but it wants 2 HTML tags. I can see here, 0002. So we have to start working our way out slowly, because there's no more HTML tags in here for us to attack in the div, right? The image, don't worry about the image. It's just, right, that's fine. We just want to work on that div. So we have to work our way back one, right? So we can go to main, or we can go to section. I like section. I'm going to do section. Let's see if that works. Section, div. And then I'm going to just change the color to exactly what it says here, nothing else. Okay, if it says blue, please don't make it orange. It makes it way easier for me to grade. If you want to get good grades, make it easy for me to give you grades, right? So background color is blue. Let's see if this works. It does. So we were able to meet the specificity of 0002, right? Because there's 1 and 2. And our proximity is good because we started with our div. We have a section with a div inside of it. So there it is, a div, and there's the parent section, and our proximity is good. Everything's great. Perfect. Let's just write this so we have our 0002. All right. Our first one's done. You guys see how this kind of works? We're going to start at the level it wants and work our way out as required. Okay, let's go to number 2. So in number 2, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say we want it to be, they're all going to be a background color of whatever. So background color of the next one, number 2, is green. And this one has a specificity value of 0011. Now, looking at Piggy number 2, can anyone figure out what the specificity is, or what the CSS is going to be? Now, again, we're looking for, what is it, 0011, which means what? What does that mean, 0011? What are we looking for?
So you want a class selector and a tag, an HTML.
Yeah, we want exactly a class selector and an HTML tag selector, right? One of those two, or both of those things. So we're going to start with proximity, which means we're probably going to start with our tag, right? So we're going to start with our div. Now, based on that proximity, where we are, we're in Piggy 2, and we need to have a class. Is there a class that will work based on this?
Piggy dash 2.
Yeah. So you guys, if you want to type it in the chat, guys, if you guys want to take a stab at it, anybody wants to, they think they can come up with a solution. Right. We've got the one HTML tag, but we still have a class, and we still want to remember our proximity is important, right? So what do you think is a good idea for a class? .piggy2. Yep, that probably makes sense. .piggy2. Right there, and it turns green. My dog barked. So it must be right. So, okay, he really likes green pigs. So we've got the div with Piggy 2. Now I could have said something like, I could have gone in and said a class of piggies. Like I could have gone something just so we can see by example. I could have said piggies and a space of div, but then we have this issue of it changes multiple things, right? So it's always better to start with your proximity. Right? You guys get it? Yeah. Okay. Let's keep going. So we're on to task number 3 already. We've got our Piggy 3. So let's see what we want here. It wants for a 0012. So I'm going to start like this, like I always do. And I know you guys are probably already on it. So we want 0012. And I'm just going to put the background color in. We're on task number 3 at this point, so we want it to be orange. Okay. Now we need, what do we need here? We need 2 HTML tags and one class. I'm going to let you guys take a stab at this one. Remember your proximities, and if there's no more of something, then you can go one level out towards the parent or the grandparent, and then on as required. It's always best to start here. Start at the tag you're trying to affect. In this case, it's that Piggy tag, right? I would say we're probably looking, look at the difference. Look at number 2, 0011. Now we're looking for 0012. So we can probably, you got it. So we can probably say something like div.piggy3, right? We know that we've got a div with a Piggy, the class of Piggy3. Okay, that's going to give us one of our HTML and one of our class, which means we just need one more HTML tag to work with. We don't have any more left inside of this div. So we have to what? We have to go to the parent and see if there's anything. Okay, section or main. So let's just see if we go to section, what we get. Yep, there that works. And main would also work, right? I could say main as well. It also works, but I'm trying to keep the proximity as close as possible. When I say proximity, I want to be within parent levels. Like there's no sense in going to the grandparents when the parent will work fine. We're keeping ourselves closer. Proximity is important. Yeah. It's not wrong. It's just a different way of tackling it.
I see what you mean. It's just.
Yep. And this is why we do this together, right? I think this is so important. We can all learn valuable lessons from these things. So that's what we're looking for. So again, we just worked our way out from this specific item and then working our way back out and beyond. So far, you guys, is this helping you guys understand the concept? You guys, is this a valuable exercise so far?
Absolutely, Rob. Absolutely.
Okay, good. I like to just check in with you guys to make sure you guys are getting it. Marina, do you have a question?
Yes. I would like to know why in the first exercise 0002, when we put section div, the others pig didn't take the blue color background.
Let's see. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, that's a weird thing. That's just by function of when I created this, when this assignment was created, it's because we have a very certain way we had to write it so that everything will overwrite properly. So that's why the first one's done for us. It's just by example. You're absolutely right. It should have been more specific, but I wanted to start really broad, and it's just, we have to kind of give each one a unique number. I'm really glad you picked that up. It's something I don't like about this exercise. The curriculum was built by a developer for us, but yeah, you're absolutely right. That's very arbitrary. So it should probably have been something like Piggy 1, in which case the number would have been what, 1, 2. That would have made much more sense in that case.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're right. So this one's a really weird kind of, the first exercise is weird, but I'm really glad you picked that up. Really well done. Okay. It's just because we had to design it. Sorry, guys. Let's move on to number 4. And let's see where we're at here. Number 4 is going to be purple. So I'm going to do the same thing I like to do here. I'm going to say background dash color. I'm going to save myself some grief from now on, and I'm going to do that. Copy. That's how all good designers roll. And I'm going to say it's going to be, what are we at? 0021, right? 0021. Okay. What do you guys think? I'm not going to bother moving this around because we've got it, sorted out. So most specifically, right? So div.piggy.piggy-4. Let's go see. So in the case of, someone said div.piggy, so we've got one HTML, 2 classes, one HTML, 2 classes there. Let's go give it a whirl. So everything's going to be on the item itself, right? So Patel, we have to be careful because you have an ID in there, right? That would mean that this number would have to be like this, right? The specificity that we have here has to match what we're trying to get. And there's no ID, and the ID lives in the 3rd slot, right? We're looking for a 0021, not a 001 111, right? Or 0101. That'd be a weird one. Okay, so let's see if we can keep it all inside the same Piggy with Carol's solution, which is going to be 1 HTML class and 1 HTML tag and 2 classes. So the div has to have a class of Piggy and a class of Piggy 4. Does that work for us? Sure, it does. Yeah. So we're keeping all of the proximity. It's specific only to this one element. It's really, really handy in that way. So Pato, does that make sense to you when I explain about the ID? Yeah. Great. Okay. All right. So we've got number 4 done. Let's move it on to number 5. All right. I love it. I'm just going to actually change this up. I want to do like that. And then I'm going to go. I'm all about making little templates for myself, guys. That's the smart way to do it. Okay, right there. So I know this one for Piggy number 5, we're going to be looking at the color of pink, and the specificity we want in this case is 0031, which means 1 HTML tag, 3 classes. All right, what do you guys think? We're on Piggy number 5. We all know what the Piggies look like. I'm just going to leave this at the top so we can see what the parents and grandparents look like too. So 1 HTML tag, I'm sure you can guess what that's going to be, right? And then 3 classes. And if you excuse the pun, we can piggyback on previous assignment or previous classes if we want to see what that's going to look like. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got in Mitchell's example that he's posted, we've got 3 classes. Okay, so we get specific. We're going to use the same format, right? We're going to quote unquote piggyback on it. So div.piggy, except this time we're using piggy 5. Okay, and it's also going to ask specifically for, I'll help you in this one sec, Steve. I'm pretty sure I know what the issue is going to be for you. It's also asking for a third class. And so we can move our way back one level to a class of piggies from the parent, right? If we're in piggy 5, we just go back one level to the piggy. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to say dot piggies, and then it'll change. Now, if your colors aren't changing, chances are your punctuation is incorrect. Make sure that all of your pardon me, all of your brackets are correct, and that you're not missing any closing brackets. Because as soon as I start taking away closing brackets, things get broken, right? Make sure all your brackets are in place. Okay, so again, we're starting in the inside and working our way back out. Let's take a look at piggy number 6. Piggy number 6 is going to be the color of gray, G-R-E-Y, and we're into getting a little more specific, 0101. All right. So in this, for piggy number 6, 0101, which means we need one HTML tag and one ID, no classes. What do you guys think? We're on piggy number 6. Yeah, div piggy 6, basically saying this, just this first part. It's got to be a div with an ID of piggy 6, so we can put it all together. A div that has an ID of piggy 6, right? And it changes to gray. If the colors aren't changing, it's almost guaranteed because you're missing a yeah, or spacing. It's that could also well be the solution. I'm just going to continue on, Steve, and then I'll once everyone's submitting, we'll do a breakout room and I'll give you a hand. Okay, we'll get it sorted. It's usually almost always spelling or punctuation or a small little thing like that. The code's probably correct. Oh, you got it. Perfect. Great. And remember, guys, this is all recorded. I hope it's recorded. Let me see. Okay, I continued. Yeah, so it's all recorded. You can always go back, and you have till midnight to submit. So I'm just going to continue to move forward. I'm glad you got it, though. Okay, we've got our div with a piggy 6. Everyone understand how we got that? That's just because we're just grabbing this stuff. There's no space where it's right next to it, so it means it's a div that has to have a piggy, an ID of piggy 6. All right, let's move on. We're on a piggy number 7. In this case, we're going to have a color of white, and the specificity is going to be 0221. So what does 0221 mean for us? What are we looking for specificity?
Looking for 2 IDs, 2 classes, and then 1 element.
Yep, you guys are getting it. Once you start wrapping your head around what this means, it all becomes very pedantic. You're like, oh, this is easy. I can start. I mean, it's just with practice, right? But this is why this is a great exercise. So let's just break that down, right? Remember, start with your proximity real low. We're in piggy number 7 right now, and we're going to work our way out from there. What do you guys think? This one's pretty complicated, but yeah, once you start wrapping your head around the idea, then yeah, you guys got it. It's a no-brainer, right? I'll mark it in, and then we'll go from there. There's a couple of different options of doing it. So you guys have piggies, and then we go in specifically div with the hashtag of the ID of piggy 7, yeah, and a class of piggy and a class of piggy 7, right? And that's if we're working in piggy 7, then we say, okay, it's got to be a div. There it is. Has to have an ID of piggy 7. It does. It has to also have a class of piggy, which it does, and has to also have a class of piggy 7. That's super specific just by itself. But because this assignment is looking for this absolute specificity, that's what this assignment does. That's why this one was weird. It's because we're asking for specifics. Then yeah, we also have to look for one more ID. So we work our way back out to the nearest parent, which is the ID of piggies. right? Okay. Lastly, we have our final piggy, which is looking for a 1010. And the background color on this one is going to be a gold. What do you guys think of this one? This is the tricky one. What are we looking for here? Let's break this down. We're looking for two things, right?
There's the class selector, and then the first one, which I think is the inline
Or
selector.
inline, or
I don't remember the other name.
important, right? So that's the trick here, guys, is we know we can probably come up with a specific class, right? So we want to, using proximity, say, well, this is probably the best specific class for Piggy 8. So let's do that. So let's say Piggy-8. That's probably going to satisfy our class selector, but we're still looking for something in that first box. And when we look over here, it says inline. But if we remember the slides that we went through, there's, yeah, we're not really allowed to affect it. It says we're not allowed to change the HTML, because otherwise it'd be easy. I would just go back in here and I would say whatever it is, gold, right? And it should work. I don't want to do that though. Yeah, see, we want to keep it red. Since we can't change the HTML, we have to look at other solutions. Is there another solution for getting this first slot filled, right? This one here, inline. Is there another solution? There is. We can use the important declaration. And the important declaration supersedes everything. It overrides all the other things. Okay, and this is why I'll be very clear, guys. Important is not allowed. If I see important in your code, then it means it's a band-aid fix for an existing problem, and you didn't fix the problem. You just put a band-aid on it, and so it'll cost you marks. But we're going to use it as an example here to show you what we can do. Since it's not changing, and I can't change the HTML, what I do is I've got background color gold. I've selected Piggy 8 because it's the class that makes it's most specific to this one. And I'm going to go right after where it says gold, but before the semicolon, I'm going to hit a space, and I'm going to say exclamation mark, and immediately followed by the word important. Okay. Once I do that, it takes precedence over any other selector, anything else. It's the most important one. And that'll change the color. Right. I say what selector I want, or what value I want on the property. The property's background color, the value is gold. And then what I do is I put a space, and then I can use exclamation mark important. Remember, there's no space in between that. It's just exclamation mark important, all one word. And that'll work on anything ever. That's as a blanket statement. But guys, think about what's happening here. This is kind of a catch-all to say, I couldn't make it work because I didn't put the time and effort into getting my specificity right, or something, whatever. So I'm going to use just a band-aid to make it fixed. But this can cause so many problems, because now when you try and override this later, it becomes a major issue, right? So this should be a case scenario for me to use. This would be if a client comes to me and says, I have a major launch tomorrow. My web designer failed me. I need this website fixed and I can't do it. Rather than going in and just trying to, figure out this, doing all those things, and I have no time to do it, I would use something like this just to override values quickly. Another situation where I might use it, and I probably shouldn't tell you guys about, is if for paywalls. I hate paywalls. So if I go to you know what, I'm not even gonna, never mind. No, that's okay. But anyway, there's some good uses for this that we can use with, right? But it's, as you can imagine, it's if I have to use the important tag, it means that my specificity is wrong somewhere, right? Maybe my ordering is wrong, specificity, inheritance, something like that. Ian, yeah, do you have something?
Yeah, you mentioned getting past paywalls.
He's like, hold on, man.
That's valuable information.
It is that I'm not really supposed to. I shouldn't be sharing guys all that stuff, so it's okay.
All right, understandable.
Maybe another time when it's not on recordings or something. Maybe, I don't know. It's just a matter of using the inspector tool properly, guys. Honestly, it's not a secret. If you use the inspector tool, you can turn things on and off. If I was to go to Algonquin College this is, I think we should have a whole section on the inspector tool. And it only exists in Chrome. So I go to Chrome. If I wanted to say, for example, I can adjust things that need adjusting. If I go to, here's the logo, it exists after. That's probably a terrible idea, but I can adjust the CSS from inside of here. I can just change things around, or I can say display. I'm working on the logo in particular. I can say display none and get rid of it. And if that didn't work, then I could do something like important. Now imagine if this whole thing was grayed out and there was a pop-up box that said, I don't know, pay me or you can't see this website. And I just went in and said display none important. I don't know, maybe that would work. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. So this is the assignment, guys. I'm going to get in trouble. I know it. So we've got this idea of specificity. Now it's not likely at all that you'll have to do it backwards, where you're going to know the specificity and then you're going to have to go and design things. Okay, that's a very rare case, but I feel like this is very valuable in seeing it from both sides and kind of being able to think. I feel like everyone right now has a better understanding of proximity, right? The value of saying, let's start at the element we're trying to affect and work our way back, right? And that has some very important bearing on how we're writing our CSS. And then the real important bearing there is that minimal specificity is most important, because we always want to start with proximity and then look at specificity and then look at the cascade, right? Was this useful for you guys? Hopefully it was. Okay, I'm going to move forward. If you're having problems with it and it's not working, no problem, guys. Check this out. I'm going to do this. There's a pause button on your screen. Okay, so this is being recorded. You guys have a pause button. You have until midnight tonight. Okay, for anybody who does not have this working, okay, you can go back and you can take a look and it's all there. We went through it together and discussed it. That's fine. For anybody who does have it working, here's what you want to do. Go to your URL, highlight it, copy the URL, make sure it doesn't say IMD in it. If it says IMD, then you've done, we already went over that, okay? It's the wrong thing. If you submit it, you'll get a 0 because it won't show anything. So highlight that and then go to Brightspace, to the Bad Piggies assignment, and submit that URL. Okay, I'm going to give you time right now. Okay, I'll just give it, it shouldn't take longer than about 1 minute, right? Once you've done that, you're done. The exercise is done. You've just earned 2.5% of your mark. We'll do this pretty much every week for the first couple of weeks. There's going to be an in-class assignment worth 2.5%. That'll eat up a lot of your mark. Just show up to class and be ready to engage in conversation with me so we can do this together. That's the beauty of this, right? If at any point the engagement drops off, it will no longer be an in-class assessment and it will become a homework assessment. Is that fair? I think that's fair. Hadia.
Hi, can you just repeat the forking thing? I just missed it at the beginning.
How to fork?
Yeah, it's you said that we have not having pin IMD inside the URL. I just want to make sure of how to do that.
Perfect. If it says IMD here or IMD, if you forgot to fork it in the beginning, basically, if you fork it now, I think what's going to happen is it might delete all the CSS. So do yourself a favor and go in, highlight all the CSS that you've just done, copy that CSS so you have it. And then you just click on fork down here, right? Click on fork. It'll create a new version and it'll have your name there and your name here.
Notice there is a fork thing on the bottom. Okay, thank you.
Down the bottom right. And then once you fork it, if the CSS is empty, you've already copied and pasted, you can just paste your existing CSS in there and then save it and submit your link.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to move on only because, sorry, before I go, Steve, did you get what you needed?
I think Steve did.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm going to move forward. Pardon me. And everyone's focusing on the hacking. Okay, no problem at all. That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to I'm going to move forward with this. This is all recorded anyway. We have to be taking a break shortly, so I'm going to open up the second slide. We have they'll leave us about an hour, and I want to talk at some detail. Okay, just slides for lecture 4. I'm going to talk at some detail about. Let me just close this up first. It's going to save. I don't want to save it. I'm going to talk in some detail about assignment expectations. So I just save and copy the link. Yeah, you got it. Exactly. Copy the link and then paste it into Brightspace and submit it. Right. It should be codepen.io / whatever your CodePen username is /pen / a bunch of numbers and letters. Okay. Now, we're going to be talking about assignment expectations, and then I'm going to go over the page redesign assignments. There isn't any questions in that. Okay. So there's a few things. And this is really important, guys. Okay. So if in the future you say, well, I don't know what they mean by, he wants good commenting or he wants responsive layout. What does he mean by that? Go back to where the first assignment was, which is week 2. Okay. And look at the slides or watch the video. I'm going to go over that in detail now. This is going to be expectations for all future assignments. Okay. This is important. It's nothing, most of it is common sense, but we'll go through what we can. If we have to take a break, that's fine. If we get through it quick enough, I'll just go right to the assignment, explain it, and we can be done early, but we'll see where we're at. So all assignments that you give me should follow a few key formats, right? Responsive layout, good design, well-formatted code. There's a few things that go without saying. Don't submit late, you'll get a 0. Okay, don't do that. I will give you a 0 over time. It's like even coming to late to class. Every week that we go on, it's going to take longer for me to let you in the class, and eventually you'll have to just wait until the next break, right? Every week that's just the way it is. So making sure that things are submitted on time, making sure that you're not copying code or plagiarizing. These are just things we always, best practices, right? But for my assignments, I'm going to start with this: responsive layout, good design, well-formatted code. Okay, what does that all mean? Well, let's start with responsive layout. We are in responsive web design 2, not static web design or works on desktop web design. We're on responsive web design 2. So it is the standard. Just there is no time that I would ever design a website for a client that is not responsive. If they asked me to, I would say no. I've fired clients before. I'll fire clients again. I have no problem with it. I'm not putting my name on outdated garbage, right? Responsive is how we build. It's easy to do. We're just going to build that way. So all of your assignments should come in responsive. What does that mean? It does not mean this. It doesn't mean that we're going to have code and we're going to say body max width 1,000 pixels. Okay, that is not responsive. That's elastic. It means it's going to stretch until you hit 1,000 pixels, which looks great until your screen is like super small. It looks terrible. It's not. Responsive means it's responding and creating different layouts that are better suited to different devices or different widths. Okay, so when I say responsive, typically I mean grid or flex or even float. Okay, you're going to oftentimes see something like that. Okay, so that's what I mean by responsive. Okay, I can't be more clear about that. Max width is not going to cut it. That's elastic. It means just stretch up until a certain point. That's not really responding, right? That's just stretching. Okay, that's weak. We're stronger than that, guys. It's level 2. So with responsive layout, we want to make sure the site or the page remains functional, readable, and of good design. More about this later. Okay, put a pin in that. But functional means it works at all sizes. If there's supposed to be a drop-down menu that's going to work, all work is gradable. If you put a drop-down menu in and it doesn't work, then it's a failed. It failed to pass the cut, right? So if you can't get it working, just remove it. Readable means that as I change the width of something, blocks aren't overlapping text and cutting it off so you can't read it. Virinderpal, do you have a question? Sorry if I said your name wrong. Please forgive me.
When I follow you and I just copy the link, there is at last editors equals 0100.
Are you still talking about CodePen?
Yep. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. If you can just watch the video and go back through that, that'd be great. Okay. Just after we're done, just go back. It's not due until tonight at midnight. If you still have problems, you can message me later or whatever, but it should all be clear in the video. Okay.
No, I just have a question with edit link, because when I share it and copy link, there is no editors equals 0100. So
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. Just whatever your link is, that editor 0010 is just the order that you have the way you have the page aligned. Don't worry about that part. As long as what you can do is just click on it, copy it, and then paste it in a new screen. If it opens for you, then you're probably fine.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. Okay. Whoops, sorry about that. Asking to unmute. Okay, so all right, so functional, readable, and good design. So basically, like I said, functional is it all works as intended. Readable, nothing's being overlapped, right? And good design, we'll talk about that in a minute. All important elements should remain usable and readable. We talked about that. The layout should not break, which means, for example, if you work from max width down, if your media queries are, say, max width, then you're probably going to encounter breaking because you have to rewrite code all the time. And you might miss a breakpoint in between like 740 and 1080 or something. And then all of a sudden everything just goes crazy. Or some block pushes all the way to the side and just at some weird width and creates a big scroll bar. That's a break. It means it all of a sudden breaks its intended design. Okay, so we shouldn't have that. While we're talking about that, guys, because it's responsive, right? Mobile always comes first. Minimum width. If you have a max width, it's just a small little piece somewhere to fix one little thing. But if you're using max width all the way, like people who design desktop and then just arbitrarily work their way back, it's obvious. You're writing more code. The code is convoluted. Your specificity gets real high because you're trying to override things. Whereas if you're doing mobile first, you're just adding onto it. It makes it a lot easier. So my expectation is that all your code is mobile first. And if it's not, if you're designing the other way and you think you're just going to sneak it by me, you're not going to. It's very obvious when you see it, when you've been doing this for any amount of time. So mobile first and progressive enhancement. We're adding on as we go. What that means is media queries use minimum width. So once we hit the minimum width of something, add on these styles. Once we hit the next minimum width, continue to add on these styles, okay, or override what we need to. So it's important. And that'll fix this breaking issue for the most part. No horizontal scrolling. I don't want to see a scroll bar at the bottom that goes left to right. Can anyone tell me if I do see a scroll bar at the bottom that's pushing left or right, what's the probable cause of that? What's probably the issue? Something you would have learned. It's a theory you would have learned in level one, in your level 1 class.
I was just going to answer terrible design, but I don't know.
Well, terrible design, I mean, but terrible design can be by design too, right? There's something called brutalism, and we're going to see that in a minute here. But something about it's about widths and paddings and margins.
I think with yes, auto are.
What about the box model theory? You guys remember the box model theory? The box model theory it states basically that if you have an element that has a width and you add padding to it and margin to that, how is the element going to get bigger or smaller, right? So basically if you have a horizontal scroll bar, it means that you're using up more space than is available. So maybe you said, I want the header to have a width of 100%, but also a padding of 10 pixels. Now it's 100% plus 10 pixels. That means there's going to be a bit of overflow. In fact, 20 pixels of overflow, 10%, 10 pixels on the right, 10 pixels on the left, right? There's ways you can fix that, box sizing, border box. But if there's horizontal scrolling, it's almost always because of a box model issue or just a straight up broken layout. There's cases where you can build websites without media queries or breakpoints. It's going to require some work to get there. I'm not expecting that. Not a requirement if you can do it without it, but at this stage of the game, media queries are probably the way to go. Okay, when we start talking about Bootstrap, you really don't have to worry too much about media queries for one or two assignments. But for now, we're probably going to be using lots of media queries. And then absolutely don't forget to use the viewport meta tag. Otherwise, you'll end up with one of those weird websites where you open it up on your phone and it becomes absolutely tiny, right? And it looks like it's an actual full-size website and you can't click on anything. So that's crazy. So that's the expectation there. I'm going to go through the next 2 slides really quick, and I'll come back for examples, and we'll keep going on. Okay. So we'll take a break here in a minute. Okay. So the next one, good design. So a lot of people think, oh, I'll know it when I see it, right? Good design is simple. Okay. Good design is consistent, right? So all the paragraphs look the same, except for maybe if there's 1, 2 special ones. Again, remember, we're going for that lowest specificity. So it becomes really easy to do simple and consistent when we're talking about the lowest specificity. Readable, that means contrast, font size, things like that, right? Small refresher on media queries. Sure, when we get, we're talking about Flexbox next week, so I'll show you how to integrate all those things and go into media queries, because I love media queries too. It's a game changer. So I have no problem with that next week, okay? Just remind me. So simple and consistent. Readable is important. A couple of things about readable. Contrast is really important, guys. You got to remember contrast. If you take a photo and put some text on it, you're gonna have a hard time reading it, right? You know what it is as the designer, but you always have to, in everything we do as web designers, we have to think about the end user. I've done a lot of work for clients who have customers that I'm building, and then the client that I'm working with thinks that I'm building a website for them. And I have to correct them and say, I'm building a website for your customers. I'm just using your input, right? So we're always thinking about the end user. That's the most important thing. So think about, look at it and say, I know what the text says, but can someone else read it? What if somebody's visually impaired? If I have a pink text on a kind of like a light red background, it's going to be hard to read for somebody who's visually impaired. So make sure your contrast is good, things like that. Also, a really key point, the smaller the screen, the bigger the text, not the other way around, right? We don't need giant text on a big screen, right? We need big text on mobile, right? And you know, that's what we're looking at. Appealing, again, I'll talk about that in just one sec. And intuitive means that it's easy to use, right? If you have a navigation on one page that looks a certain way, it should be the same on every page. When I say to you guys, for example, think about the internet. When you have an underline on something, what does that mean? What does it mean if a word is underlined on the internet?
Typically, it's a link, right?
Yeah, it's a link. And so if you use headings that are underlined, I'm going to try and click on it. And if I try and click on something and it doesn't go anywhere, that's going to cost you marks. It's not intuitive, because I mean, like you said, I think everybody here would agree that an underline usually means a link. That's just the de facto standard. And that leads into this idea of appealing as well, right? And this intuitive thing is just think about best practices, right? So when we talk about appealing, I want to clarify something to you guys, is that I'm teaching this, I'll be blunt, teaching this course, and I've hired to teach this course out of Ottawa in Canada and North America. So I'm teaching based on design standards from North America. Okay. I understand there's a lot of cultural implications and different, standards around the world, and that's fine. Those are things you can look into, but I have to teach from the way the government was, that I've been asked to teach here. So that comes down to color palettes that don't use a lot of primary colors. It comes down to things, text choices. Usually we're on screen, something that's good for screen-based text, like maybe sans serif fonts, these types of things, right? There's certain things that'll always be the same. If I said to you guys, what are colors that you would expect to see on a children's website, say a toy store? What are some colors? You can just pop them in the chat or something.
Yellow.
Yeah, yellow is a good choice. Anything else, anyone? Purple? Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah,
blues.
Pink, yeah.
Yep. But the kind of palettes we're looking for, bright, fun, right? Would those same colors work well for a doctor's office?
No, unprofessional.
Yeah, right. What colors would we think of, guys, for a doctor's office?
I'd say something like monotone grays, and whites, and then maybe some colors to accent.
Yeah, reds, blues, grays. Yeah, exactly. I think we all in our mind have a lot of the same ideas. In some places in the world, you might think green, because the cross where we say red cross, they would use a green cross, or a Blue Cross, right? So different places in the world, there's some cultural implications for sure, because it's just different. But all in all, appealing can be universal, right? So we're thinking about, I know I'm getting away from our break, guys. I will get to it in a second here, but appealing is an important thing. I understand we're all from different places. I'm okay with that. I can look past some things, but what I don't want to see is things like three primary colors on the web page. There shouldn't be red, blue, and green, right? That's what I would think of in terms of holiday or Christmas, right? That's about the only case that would work. If you're doing a fast food restaurant, kind of like greens and browns, you want to be careful about that. Greens and browns are good for maybe a landscaping company, but they're not really going to stir my appetite, right? Just think in broad terms. Try and think what's out there. Also, you're going to be learning some things in UX theory that you can, or UX design, that you can bring in. Okay, so these are all key points of good design. Just the last slide I have, key takeaways: no more than 3 different fonts, right? Let me give you a hint. I always use Google Fonts, Google font pairings. Look at this. There's no shortage of places to go looking for Google Fonts. I'm just picked one at random. Okay, there we go. Actually, I'm going to go. There's one different one I like that has a. Here's this one's nice. Shows you how to use them. There we go. So this one has Roboto condensed bold for headings, with cabin regular for body text. Right. This one is Railway Light with open sans. These are all available from Google Fonts. Right. Why would you use default fonts? It's so easy to use Google Fonts, and then no more than 3. So typically headings, body text, and then maybe you want to throw in one extra one for like accents or something like that. But no more than 3. Otherwise, it just gets to be real confusing. Okay, except for there's very certain times that it works. Text should be short and succinct, 50 to 70 characters long. If it needs to be longer than that, maybe add a new page with a read more to go somewhere else. But be careful about long passages of the text. Nobody wants to be stuck reading for hours, right? An obvious visual hierarchy. More important stuff at the top, right? The logo. Where does the logo almost always go on a website?
Top left.
Top left, right? That's usually where you see it. Doesn't mean it has to go there, but if you put it at the very bottom of the page on the right-hand side, probably not great, right? Obvious visual hierarchy. No more than 5 different colors. You guys learned about coolors.co last time, right? In your last class?
Yeah, we did.
This site's awesome. Use it. Do yourself a favor and use it. It will come up with color palettes that are complementary and mathematically correct every time. Okay, you can say, oh, I love this color. That's going to be the base color of my palette for my doctor's office. I click it. No, these are too bright. Oh, I think this might be nice. Now these are all going to base off these 2. Okay, I like that. Way too bright, right? But see, it's going to try and find colors that complement, because I picked 3 muted colors now. It's trying to find brighter colors.
It is a really good site.
It's amazing. It's an amazing site. And then you just go, oh, there's my font. So make good use of that. It'll really save you. Okay. Colors should be complementary with adequate contrast. Use coolors.co. Once you start getting used to seeing good color palettes, you'll start understanding how they work together. Layout and navigation should be familiar. Don't go too crazy down the rabbit hole. If you do, that's okay. But just, think carefully about how the end user is going to perceive it. We've got some examples of good design, bad design. We're going to take a break really quick. We're going to come back in 15 minutes, finish this up really quick. Actually, sorry guys, I'm going to cut that down. I hope you guys won't mind. Can we do a 10-minute break? I just want to make sure we have enough time to cover everything. This is really important stuff. Okay.
Yeah,
so
sure.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm going to do a 10-minute timer. Okay. My apologies for that, guys. I don't like to do it, but there you go. We'll come back when that's on and we'll finish this up quickly. Thank you. All right, guys, that'll be the last break for our class here. All right, so I'm going to try and get through this quickly here. There's a couple of examples in the slide of what we consider to be, good design, and also what we consider to be poor design. So we could go over that, but I kind of want to move forward a little bit. There's still a few things to talk about. That's very, very poor design. And that's also poor design. Okay, so moving on to, this is extremely important. I hope everyone's back from their break because this part is extremely important, like very important. Well-formatted code. Okay, so this is a very key concept that I want to make sure we go through. Thoughtful comments, right? We got to make sure we have, thoughtful comments throughout the code, consistent indentation, consistent naming, and an appropriate file and folder structure. As I mentioned last week, in level 1, you learned no capitals, no spaces, things like that, but we're going to extend on that just a little bit. So comments in the code. So let's talk about that. So when we use something like this and we say header, right, or main, okay, I know that's a header and I know that's a main, right? I can see that. We've been doing this, we're level 2, right? So telling me that it's a header and then making a header tag is not useful. So what we're looking for is we want the comments that you use to be descriptive of not only what the code does, but why you chose it. Simply put like that. I'm going to give you a scenario. Imagine you're working in an agency after you get done this job or get done school, and you happen to be really good at, I don't know, media queries, just for example, whatever it might be. And your boss is going to come along one day and say, hey, I need you to stop doing what you're doing right now and move over to this other project that's halfway done because they're having trouble with media queries or whatever it is you're a specialist in. And I want you to take over there. And you're going to go, okay. And you're going to go over to that project, and you're going to hope that they have good, thorough comments explaining what things do, because you have to jump in halfway through. Guys, this is the norm in agency life. Okay, this is the norm in design life. You'll get a call from a client and he says, I need this done right now, and I'm going to throw an extra 0 on the dollar figure. And you're going to go, oh, okay. And you better hope that the person who was there before you put good commenting. Okay, and that also should spur you to be a good enough designer to put comments in your code so the person after you can take over if you need to move on. And you want to believe, guys, hiring managers, team leads, creative directors, they look at this and they notice it. Okay, what the code is doing and why, not just header. Okay, there's a big difference. Always put yourself in that position of what if I had to jump into something else? Does this code need description? If it's a simple paragraph and it's got some font, whatever, no problem. If it's anything remotely complicated, ask yourself if anybody else would be able to know why in the terms of the whole project you're doing that. Same thing here with CSS. I know that's a layout container. I can tell it's cells because it says cell. How about let's get a little more specific? It doesn't mean we have to have code on everything. It just means that, or comments on everything, right? Some things are what we call self-commenting. They're obvious. But if it's, anything at all, like, so even if you have a footer and the text has been reduced, why did they reduce the text? You could say, reduce text size to, footer content doesn't take away from the main body, right? That makes sense. Reduce the text size in the footer so that your eyes aren't drawn to that. Just little things like that. It's a design choice, but you can put that in. Okay. In almost all of my assignments, about 10% of my grade is set aside for that. Okay. So commenting is very important, and it comes down to very simply, what is the code doing and why did you choose to do that with it? Why did you choose that code? Okay. Consistent indentation. This is terrible. Somebody in the last group looked at this and said, it looks like a punch in the face. Okay. It's terrible. It's hard to see. We can't read that. We don't know where the child parent hierarchy is, right? We need to know the child parent hierarchy, and this doesn't tell us what that is. So proper indentation. When you have a child inside of a parent, you indent one level. Right? That's all there is to it. That's how we do it, right? These two here, this H2 in this paragraph, they're siblings. The paragraph is not in the H2. They're on the same level. They're both children of the article tag. So we just put them inside. Okay, that's proper indentation. I'll be looking for that as well. That'll be under the CSS. Most of my assessments have a rubric item for CSS validation. Okay. This is going to cost you marks in that section. I can't possibly hit all criteria. So this is where you would, make sure it's properly, the CSS is in good shape. Again, probably about 10% of your total mark is going to be good quality code and validation. Same thing with CSS. This is a nightmare. Please don't do this. Look how much cleaner that is. Easy to read. We know exactly what it is by looking at it. This tells me nothing. This tells me everything. Okay. Indentation. So far, any questions about commenting or indentation? Okay. It's fairly straightforward, right? Keep your code clean, use best practices going forward. We're in level 2, so I'm going to be a little more stringent, right? The first assignment or so, I'll be like, okay, make sure you clean up your code. If it continues to be a problem, I'm going to say, I'm going to remind you to clean up your code by docking you marks. That's what I am. I'm not a monster. I have to remind you somehow. And if the first time telling you doesn't work, then I'll have to take it out of marks, right? Consistent naming. Here we have dash where there should be a space. Here we have underscores. We've got uppercase, lowercase. We got nothing. Oh boy. Okay. That'll drive you crazy. Nice and clean. Always, if you're going to use underscores, use underscores. If you're going to use dashes, right? If you're going to use camel case, use camel case. If you're going to keep it all lowercase, whatever you need to do. Okay. Consistent naming. Very important. Okay, file and folder names, stuff you already knew, but I'm going to touch on it again because I see it all the time. All lowercase letters, okay? Even file extensions, .jpg, double check. If it's uppercase, I'm going to remind you about it. If it happens again, you're going to get docked marks, okay? I'm telling you right now, it'll cost you marks if you use uppercase letters. We don't do that, okay? Once we get into servers, capitalization matters. Because in one server, it'll say, oh, that had a capital. You said capital I in index. That's why it's not working, right? So all lowercase letters. We avoid numbers. We can write out, if we want to say 2, we can say 2, but try to avoid using numbers in our names, right? Naming conventions. No spaces. Either pick a dash or an underscore. Use file extensions where they're necessary. HTML, CSS, okay, lowercase, please. Be consistent with the dashes. And a site's homepage is always index.html. Okay, it's always going to be index.html. It's not front or home or homework or assignment. It's index.html. If there's only one file in there, it's going to be index.html. If there's several, the homepage is going to be index.html. That's always the case. Again, in servers, that's because it'll look inside a folder and it'll say, oh, here's a bunch of HTML files. Is there one called index? And if there is, it'll say load that first. It's the index. It's the starting point. Okay, let's talk about the assignment we have. Again, this due date is not accurate. For due dates, always please refer to Brightspace. This assignment is going to be due in 1 week. Okay, here, May 19th, it was open at 8. It's going to be due on May 26th at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. Rob, you're a monster. I'm not a monster. I just don't want you guys working on your assignment when you should be paying attention to class. That's all it is. Try and have your assignment submitted beforehand. Submit early, submit often. You can submit as many times as you want to. I will only get the most recent one. I will only check the most recent one as well, right? So if you submit something late, and it comes up with a late flag for me, and you send me an email and say, oh, I just used the last one. You submitted late. Okay. Don't submit after the due date. Okay. I just don't have the time. I talked to you guys about my workload. I just don't have the time to go searching through previous, for this one and that one. Well, maybe we'll get that one. Just submit up to the due date. Try and get it in early. Okay. I think that's fair and reasonable. So let's talk about what we're going to be doing for this redesign. I'm going to go to the IMDAC. Or actually, for you guys here, you can get it right in the Brightspace. You can click on it. It's going to take you to the IMDAC, though. Okay, let's take a look at what this is. The page redesign. Client has asked you to make his personal web page pretty. We're going to use what we've learned about CSS and web design to improve the design of the provided web page. So where redesigned web page should be fully optimized for multiple screen sizes, browsers, and devices. It should also be visually appealing, fulfill the general requirement of the assignment. What does that mean? You're going to take a one-page website that looks ugly, and you're going to just tweak it to make it look good. Okay, it's very subjective, very, it could be anything to anyone. It's going to look different for all of you. Okay, I hope it's going to look different for all of you. If it doesn't, we have a problem. But there's a few key things we want to look at. So these are requirements. These aren't maybes. These are requirements. Always requirements. In order to complete this assignment successfully, you have to meet these following requirements. Start by downloading the page redesign starter file. Let's do it. Done. Inside the starter files will be index.html, base.css. Let me just open it. It's not going to work. Style.image, or wait, hang on here. Let me just get this up. I'm all over the map, guys. I'm getting flustered because I hate being down to the wire. I'm gonna load that in. Come on now. Did you work? You didn't work. Okay, well, there we go. Let's do that. Oh, it's good I didn't. Oh my gosh. All right. Close all. 1 second, guys. I'm just gonna open this up and get it loaded in so we can see it. There we go. There's the assignment. I'm just gotta slow down a little bit. I'm just downloading the assignment and putting it into Visual Studio Code so we can see it. There we go. Okay. So download that. Inside, we're going to see an index.html, base.css, style.css, and an images folder. So if we look inside the images, we've got this really creepy businessman. We've got base.css that has some base files. There's a README that basically just has some descriptive, the same thing that's in the, it's basically the same file. Okay. And we've got style.css that's empty. And take a look. Base.css is in here, style.css. Okay. It's important stuff. Okay, you're only going to make changes to style.css. Okay, notice that base comes after it. So there's going to be a specificity override component here, right? You're going to have to override things or come up with a better specificity than what's in base.css. You cannot change index.html or base.css. Okay, don't change them. It's in bold. If you do it, major problems. Do not change index.html or base.css. You will only change style.css. And I'm warning you now, because style comes before base, means you're going to have to get your specificity down to a level so that when you're making changes, that it's going to do better than what's in base.css. Okay, so you're going to have to do some counting on this one. That's the real trick. Otherwise, it's just a simple web page. The CSS should be valid and well formatted. It should use minimal specificity required to override the base styles. Do not use the important tag. Okay, you can't use that one. That'll be a really bad for, it'll really detriment your mark. Okay, major. Okay, do not use important. Comments should be provided in the CSS explaining what your code does and why you chose to use it. This is a good opportunity to say why, what specificity was better. In fact, if you really want to do well in that rubric criteria, when you write something out, tell me what the specificity is. Do like we did in CodePen, put a little comment or a little space, put a /* and write down the specificity. Not only will that help you to tell me that you know what you're talking about, but it'll also help you to look back and say, oh, this has to be better than that. I need to beat this number. Okay, it'll help you, trust me. The redesigned page should respond to different screen sizes. Max width doesn't count. I want to see columns, right? Column design. Right, we're going to look at it in a second. I'll show you, let's take a look right now. I'm going to go to index.html. I'm not going to use the live screen here. I'm going to go here. There we go. That's the website. Look familiar? Look at the contrast. It's just terrible. Just terrible. Right now, it is not responsive. There is a kind of a width thing going on, not responsive. I want to see best practice that you would have learned, right? Remember, we're busting down. We're at this point. This should be the starting point, and we're going to build our way up from there. You can use any technology you want to, media query, float, grid, flex, whatever you want, but make sure there's column to layout of some kind in here, okay, somewhere in there. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Doesn't have to be, but if you want to maximize your marks, that's what you're looking at, okay? And it's going to respond to different screen sizes. And the redesigned page should be functional and visual appealing across multiple browsers. Pro tip, guys, I do all my grading in Chrome. I just do all my grading in Chrome. I'll look at your code, and if something is out of date or shouldn't be used, I'll check it out on caniuse.com and make a decision. But I do my grading in Chrome because when I look at the code, I pretty much know what's going to work and what's not going to work in what browser. Okay. So those are the requirements. That's what we're looking to do. Your task is to just redesign this. A lot of it's obvious. That's Comic Sans. That's not going to do at all. Default fonts and colors, contrast. There's no layout whatsoever. We've got sizing issues, font issues, major color issues, and it's not responsive. Okay, but you can change all that. And more importantly, you're going to have to override that specificity. Let's look at the rubric. Fair warning, guys. Getting in the excellent category isn't hard. Maxing out the excellent category is very hard, almost impossible. Okay, it's not almost impossible, but it's very few people are going to graduate with a 100 all the way across the board in my class. Okay, it doesn't happen, because what I consider to be excellent means production quality. It's the kind of work I would put out. It's attention to detail that is ready for production to go out into the world. Okay, and typically, because we're students, we're not there. It's my job to give you guys things to work on. Right? It's very easy in my class to get an A plus, to get like a high GPA. You can get the honor roll. You can get the 90% is what you need in order to be an A plus. That's not terribly difficult if you're paying attention to reading the requirements, looking at the rubric and saying, what am I being graded on, and following best practices, right? So just keep that in mind. So I would expect most people would be in around this range, but let's go through it really quickly. Just read the layout and tell me, or read the rubric, and it'll tell you what's expected, right? The layout demonstrates superior layout that transitions seamlessly between screen sizes and optimizes on all browsers. You've got to be really on the ball to get close, to get down to like it's perfect and seamless and superior and optimizes on all. Those are pretty broad sets. I have no problem giving a 12 or a 13 or something like that. I have no issue with that. A 14 or a 15, I'm looking for really good quality. The bell curve is real at this point, okay? So don't get mired down in the details with it. 13 or 14 is still a really great score. Okay, but that's what we're looking for. And then all the way down to no meaningful attempt to create a responsive website. Okay, so you use maxed width. There was no columns layout, which means there wasn't items beside each other at certain points, or the navigation didn't break down. Okay, things like that. Okay, again, I'm not a monster. I'm just going to mark accordingly. Same thing with design. Okay, design is outstanding with creative with excellent use of colors, fonts, and white space. Do you guys know what import is? The import tag. If I went to the style sheet over here and I said, you guys can't change the index, right? So how are you supposed to get Google Fonts in here? Well, I'm going to show you how. Go to the style sheet, get ready for that. And we go to Google Fonts and I say, I want to use Roboto. So there's Roboto. I'm going to select that style. We notice there's link. We notice there's also import. Okay. All I did is I went to Google Fonts. I selected a style. There's an option for link, but there's also import. I'm going to click it. Notice it now, it lives inside of a style tag, which means it can go in a style sheet. Copy this. I do not need the style tag. It's going in a style sheet. I don't need the style tag, just the @import rule. I copy that and I put it at the top of my CSS file. And then, just as if it was in my head, I can just use the CSS rule to add it in. All my H1s are now going to be font family Roboto. And when I save it and refresh it, then all my H1s are now Roboto. Okay. This is all saved. You can go back and look at the video. Very straightforward. Notice again, there was no style tag in there, but now I didn't change the CSS or the HTML, but I added this in. I can do this with any type of CSS. I can import it in. Okay, so that's going to help you in your design section. Good use of colors. Use coolors.co. Stay away from lots of primaries. Okay, limit your colors and your font choices. Okay, this kinds of thing. White space. This one here is a killer. Did you use good typographic rhythm? Are your line heights set properly? This is going to get you excellent. If I see default colors anywhere, there's no excellent, right? If I see default fonts anywhere, there's no excellent. If you want Times New Roman, specify Times New Roman. Things like that. Okay, this is all subjective. I try to stay away from the right-hand side here. Specificity. I think that goes without saying. Do yourself a favor. Just write down the specificity of any code, any CSS you write, mark down the specificity. And then once you have that written down, that'll go a long way towards getting you marks, guys, because then it's going to help you make the right decisions. Okay, minimal specificity versus reasonable specificity. Okay, that's the difference. It's like perfect. Like all of them are the lowest possible specificity. Like you paid attention. There's proximity in mind. All those things, as compared to you came pretty close. Okay, that's the difference. That's those few extra points. CSS, well valid and formatted. If your code does not validate, if I go to CSS validator, all of these links, by the way, are in for Google Fonts, the validator, Coolors. They're all inside of overview down here. Scroll down a bit. validator, CSS validator, image optimizer, so you're not putting giant images in, Coolors, Google Fonts, they're all listed inside of here. Okay. So if I go to the validator and I type something in and it gives me an error, then it's going to tell me what the error is and where to fix it. You said color read instead of red on line 7. Perfect. I'll fix it. It validates. If your code does not validate when you put it in here, then you're going to get 0 on this whole criteria. Your code has to validate. My days of saying, well, maybe it's okay, we'll let it go, are over. It's the easiest thing you can do, and you should be validating all the time. I'll get to the images in a second. Probably not, and I'll explain why. And then lastly, comments, it doesn't have a mark in the middle for it, but I'm okay with a mark in the middle. So oftentimes people are, they either just don't do it or they do. That's kind of where people are. But keep in mind, CSS is worth 10%. It's out of 50. CSS is worth 10%. Comments is worth 10%. Right? When I say CSS, we say valid and well formatted. I can't possibly put every criteria in the world in here. So that also means best practices, good naming, consistency, all the things we covered in the expectations, right? So I'm just going through. Let me show you really quickly. Oh, and then lastly, sorry, the submission. The reason more images are going to be an issue is because you're only submitting to me the style sheet. You're going to go to Brightspace. You're going to go to whatever it is, however you prefer to do it, assignment or whatever. Okay, you're going to click on it, and it's going to say, okay, what do you want to submit? And you're going to go to your right here to your files, and you're going to take the style sheet and you're going to drag it in and upload it on Brightspace and submit it. You're not going to submit a link, nothing like that. All I want is your style sheet. So in that way, it's going to be difficult to link in images unless you have them hosted somewhere or they're on GitHub. Then I guess, yeah, you could probably do it that way. But it's not an expectation. Again, guys, I'm not expecting you to make the next Facebook right here. I just want you to put your best practices in what you've learned so far. Okay. I'm not, again, this is week 2, week 3. I'm not looking for amazing. Just look at the rubric, follow the rubric, and do your best with it. And where are we? And we'll be fine. Let me show you how I look at my rubrics really quick. So we're on the same page. Then you'll see what my rubric looks like. I think I might have showed you already. I'm going to go to the rubric for this assignment, which is page redesign. Boop. I'll click it. This is what I see. And I'm going to go, okay, I'll look at your assignment over on, I have a bunch of screens. So I'll look at one, I'll say, okay, there's your assignment. And I'll come over here and I'll say, I'll test it. I'm going to grab it and do the things. I'm going to look at the code. I'm going to say they're right here. That best sums it up. And then also if I need to adjust the number, I'll give it, like I'll move it up to 13 or 12.5 or whatever I need to do to match that criteria. If there's no comments, then very simply, the comment is the layout is responsive and optimized for multiple browsers and screen sizes, which means you didn't quite make it for all browsers or it wasn't seamless between all screen sizes. That's all that means. If there was another reason why you didn't get the mark, I will leave a comment in there. You did pretty good, but there was a horizontal scroll that caused an issue, right? So I'll leave you those comments. The reason I'm not going crazy with it and with every single rubric item is because typically students don't give a crap. I'll be honest with you. They look at the grade. They don't look at the feedback. I can see the ones that do and don't in Brightspace. It tells me how many times you log on, when you log on last time, if you left your screen. Well, like if we're doing a quiz and you leave your screen, it tells me. I know all those things, right? It's intuitive that way. So I'll leave comments where they're necessary. Otherwise, if you get if I click this one for selectors, that means simply that the selectors had excessive specificity. You can ask me for more clarification, but I don't know how more specific I can be than that. If there's a reason otherwise, then I'll tell you in the comments. And I'm always okay to clarify comments that I've left you. Okay, so that's how I do it. Notice in here, there's no names, nothing like that. I don't see a picture of your face or anything. I see my face up here with I miss my beard. But anyway, all of that stuff. Okay, so that's where we're at with it. And that's how I'm going to work. So I just click, and I hit save and go. I'm human. I make mistakes. If you find a mistake in your code or in your assessment, for example, CSS quality, it says it wasn't valid, but it was actually valid, you let me know and I'll mark that in. I'll fix that. I'll fix it. All right. So that is that's how we're doing that. So again, the only submission you're going to have is the style.css, and you don't have to zip it or anything. Just submit style.css. Are there any questions about that? Pretty straightforward, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and again, don't beat yourself up, guys. Do your best, but you know, don't like I'm not marking this against like some beautiful, crazy, amazing website. I said I would give you a refresher on media queries next class. If you need another refresher, you should be able to access your MTM 6130. What minimum amount of hours should we probably spend working on this assignment? Well, that's really, I mean, that's arbitrary, right? Depends on what your schedule is. Just 1 second, Jesse, I'll go back to you really quick. If you want to, you can always go back to 6130, right? Just go back and you can look in here and you can say you have to just scoot through for media queries, or at any point in any of them, you can just type in media queries and it'll bring you to all the information that you need to know in there, right? Tons of information. This is such a useful feature that's underused, right? Media queries. I will go back over it again with you next class, but this will be submitted by then. Okay. If you are really stuck, make an appointment with the SPA. And if the SPA can't help you, then you can come reach out to me about it. But the expectation is look it up first yourself. If that doesn't work, check out with the SPA. And if that doesn't work, then go ahead. We don't need to commit in GitHub. This is probably the only assignment. I'm going to look at the assignment outline. This is probably the only assignment we have that that doesn't have that isn't going to use. Sorry, guys, that isn't going to submit to GitHub. Okay, this one in particular doesn't go on GitHub. These are almost all going to be. There's 1 or 2 exceptions, but most of these will be on CodePen. Most of the exercises here are going to be, at least these 2 are going to be submitting a GitHub link. Page redesign, I just want the style sheet. It's the easiest way for me just to get your specificity. I guess in future, I could get you to push it up to GitHub. It'd probably be a smarter bet. But for now, please just submit the file, right? Both of the projects, midterm and final, will be a link on GitHub. Okay. If there's any question, I have no problem. But anytime that you're curious about those things, just take a look at the just take a look at the submission. It's gone. Just give me a sec, guys. It'll always tell you what the expectation is in submission. Submit only style.css file to the page redesign assignment on Brightspace. Or you can ask me to clarify. I'm happy to do that. We can't use important, but we can use it in Bad Piggies. Bad Piggies was its own assignment just to show you how to use it. But in production, we don't want to use it. It's clear right here and pretty clear in bold. Please do not use important, because if you're using important in production work, then you're kind of putting a band-aid on a problem that you should be fixing instead. Yeah. But Bad Piggies, yeah, it was definitely part of the assignment because I wanted to show you how the specificity would be used and how that number applied. Okay. Any other questions? These are all great questions. Thanks, guys. I'm glad that you're engaging. Is there any other questions you have? Okay. Hopefully you found specificity useful. You know, it's definitely an important aspect of web design. I appreciate the engagement, guys. Let's see. Hopefully you've all got the assignment submitted for Bad Piggies. If you do, I'll grade that. I'll have the grades for you by tonight. I try and endeavor to do that as much as possible. And otherwise, yeah, just any more information you need should be available online, or you can review the video, which we'll post probably. I teach till 4 today. I'll try and get it uploaded as soon as I can. It may not be until closer to dinner. I'll do my best. Unless there's anything else, I will let you guys go. Thank you so much. Have yourself a wonderful day. Really appreciate your engagement. I'll see you next week.
Thanks so much, Rob. Appreciate
Thanks, Rob.
it. Thank you.
No problem.
Have a good one.
Yeah. See
you next week.
Yeah. Take care. See y'all. Enjoy specificity. I don't know, I guess. See you guys later.
Thanks.
See ya. No problem.